The night tasted like iron and desperation. Arya's bare feet slammed against cold marble, each step a jolt of pain that shot up through her ankles, her calves, into the burning muscles of her thighs. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Behind her, the shouts grew louder, angrier, multiplying like a swarm closing in on wounded prey. The blood moon hung fat and crimson in the sky beyond the towering window she passed, casting everything in shades of rust and shadow. It seemed to mock her, that moon. They called it sacred. Holy. A time of renewal and ancient rites. But Arya knew the truth. The blood moon was a night of chains. A night when omegas like her, unwanted, unclaimed, considered broken or too wild to keep, were dragged onto wooden platforms and sold to whoever had enough coin and cruelty to spare. She'd been next. She'd seen the leering faces in the crowd, smelled the stench of unwashed bodies and alcohol-soaked breath. She'd felt the iron shackles bite into her wrists as they prepared to parade her before them. And when the auctioneer's hand had closed around her upper arm, fingers digging into flesh already mottled with bruises, something inside her had simply snapped. Not her wolf. No, her wolf had been silent for months now, buried so deep Arya sometimes wondered if she'd ever hear her again. It was something more primal than that. Something human and feral all at once. Survival. She'd slammed her elbow back into the auctioneer's throat, felt the satisfying crunch of cartilage, and run. Now the palace corridor stretched before her like a throat trying to swallow her whole. Torches guttered in their sconces, flames twisting in a wind that shouldn't exist indoors. The storm outside was building. She could feel it in the pressure against her temples, in the way her skin prickled with static. Thunder rumbled, a low growl that vibrated through the stone walls. Her lungs screamed. Each breath tasted of copper, her throat raw from gasping. The thin white shift they'd dressed her in for the auction clung to her skin, soaked through with sweat and rain from when she'd darted through the courtyard. It was meant to display her for buyers. Sheer enough to reveal curves, short enough to show legs, it offered no warmth, no protection, no dignity. The fabric was already torn at the shoulder where she'd ripped free from a guard's grip, and she could feel a warm trickle of blood sliding down her arm from where his claws had caught skin. How many were chasing her now? 5? 10? Their footsteps echoed like drumbeats, out of sync with her own frantic rhythm. She careened around a corner, her hand slapping against the wall for balance. Her palm came away wet. Rain was seeping in through somewhere. Cracks in the ancient stone, perhaps, or an open window she'd passed without noticing. Everything was a blur of panic and motion. A door. She needed a door, a room, somewhere to hide, to think, to breathe. But every door she passed was locked or led to dead ends she couldn't afford to test. The guards knew this palace. She didn't. She was a mouse in a maze designed by cats, and the exits were all illusions. A hand grasped at her hair. Arya shrieked, yanking forward. Strands ripped from her scalp, bringing tears to her eyes, but she was free again, stumbling, nearly falling. She heard the guard curse behind her, heard his boots skid on the wet marble as he lunged again. She pushed harder. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, a memory she'd tried to bury. You were born wrong, girl. Weak. Useless. The pack doesn't want you, and neither do I. He'd been the one to sell her to the auction house. Her own father. Handed her over like spoiled meat, took his coins, and walked away without looking back. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away furiously. She wouldn't cry. Not now. Not when she was this close to. To what? What was she even running toward? There was no escape from this palace. Even if she made it outside, the walls were too high, the gates too well guarded. Every exit would be watched now that the alarm had been raised. She was trapped. But trapped didn't mean defeated. The corridor opened up ahead, spilling into a wider hall. Grander. The ceilings soared higher here, held up by pillars carved with wolves in various stages of hunt and howl. Banners hung from the rafters, deep crimson and midnight black, the colors of the crown. Of the Alpha King. Arya's heart lurched. She knew where she was. The throne room lay just beyond the massive double doors at the end of this hall. She could see them now, gilded and ancient, each one depicting a scene from the old stories: the first shift, the moon goddess blessing the wolves, the formation of the packs. The throne room. The heart of the kingdom. The one place no one would expect a runaway Omega to go. Which meant it might be the only place they wouldn't look. At least not immediately. It was a terrible plan. But it was the only plan she had. Arya ran. Her vision tunneled. All she could see were those doors. All she could hear was her own heartbeat, a frantic drum that drowned out even the guards shouting for her to stop. Her bare feet barely touched the ground. She felt weightless and too heavy all at once, as if gravity itself couldn't decide what to do with her. She hit the doors with both palms, and they swung inward, heavier than she expected. The force of her momentum carried her through, and she stumbled into the throne room like a ghost crashing a funeral. Silence slammed into her. Not empty silence. Occupied silence. The kind of silence that meant dozens of eyes had just turned to look at her. Arya's breath caught in her throat. The throne room was full. Nobles lined the walls, dressed in fine velvets and silks, their expressions frozen in various stages of shock and disdain. Advisors clustered near the dais, scrolls and documents in hand, their discussions interrupted mid-sentence. Guards stood at attention along the pillars, hands already moving toward weapons. And at the far end of the room, elevated on a dais of black stone, sat the throne. It was carved from a single massive piece of obsidian, veined with silver that seemed to pulse in the torchlight. The back of it rose like a mountain peak, sharp and unforgiving. And seated upon it, utterly still, was the Alpha King. Adrian. Arya had never seen him in person. Few had. He didn't attend the auctions, didn't mingle at festivals, didn't make public appearances unless absolutely necessary. But she knew his face from the portraits that hung in every pack house, every town square. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, dark hair that fell just past his shoulders. Eyes like a winter storm, pale gray, cold, piercing. In the paintings, he looked regal, distant, powerful but untouchable. In person, he looked dangerous. He didn't move. Didn't stand or shout or react at all to her sudden intrusion. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable, as if runaway Omegas burst into his throne room every night and he'd grown bored of the spectacle. But his eyes tracked her with the focus of a predator who'd just spotted movement in the underbrush. Arya's legs trembled. She wanted to run again, but there was nowhere left to go. The guards from the corridor would be here any second. And even if they weren't, the guards already in this room were moving now, stepping away from their posts, closing in on her with the coordinated precision of trained soldiers. Panic clawed up her throat. She'd failed. She'd run straight into a trap of her own making. But then, through the haze of terror, an idea struck her. Insane. Desperate. Born from half-remembered stories her mother used to tell before she died. The throne is sacred. Anyone who seeks sanctuary at the throne cannot be moved except by the king himself. It was an old law. Ancient. She didn't even know if it still held weight, if anyone still honored it. But it was all she had. Arya lunged forward. The nobles gasped. The guards shouted. Someone called for her to stop, to surrender, to get down on the ground. She ignored them all. Her eyes locked on the throne, on the black stone and silver veins, on the symbol of ultimate authority. And she ran for it like salvation itself sat upon that dais. Adrian's eyes widened. Just a fraction. Just enough for her to see that she'd surprised him. Good. She was tired of being the only one caught off guard tonight. She reached the steps of the dais just as the first guard reached for her. His hand closed on the back of her shift, yanking her backward. The fabric tore with a horrible ripping sound, but Arya twisted, slipping out of his grip, and threw herself up the steps. Her knees hit stone. Hard. Pain exploded through her kneecaps, bright and sharp, but she didn't stop. She crawled the last 2 steps and flung herself at the base of the throne, her arms wrapping around the cold obsidian, her cheek pressing against the smooth surface. She was touching the throne, clinging to it, claiming sanctuary. For one heartbeat, The world held its breath. Then chaos erupted. Guards swarmed the dais, hands reaching for her, voices barking orders. She felt fingers tangle in her hair, her arm, her ankle. They were trying to pry her away, to drag her back down the steps and out of the throne room to whatever punishment awaited escaped auction prizes. Arya held on tighter, her fingers digging into the carved whorls of the throne, her entire body shaking with effort and terror. She wouldn't let go. She couldn't. This was her last stand. A low growl rumbled through the room. It didn't come from any of the guards. It didn't come from the nobles whispering frantically amongst themselves. It came from the throne. From him. The hands on Arya stopped pulling. The voices cut off mid-shout. Even the air itself seemed to freeze, waiting. Slowly, so slowly it felt like time had turned to honey, Arya tilted her head up. Adrian was standing. He'd risen from his throne without a sound, and now he towered over her, over all of them. He was taller than she'd expected, broader through the shoulders, dressed in black leather and dark fabric that seemed to drink in the light. His hands rested at his sides, deceptively relaxed, but Arya could see the tension in them, the way his fingers flexed slightly as if restraining himself from shifting into claws. And his eyes, those pale gray eyes, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She couldn't read his expression. Anger? Curiosity? Disgust? For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Omega and Alpha. Runaway and King. Then his nostrils flared. It was such a small movement that Arya almost missed it. But she saw the way his pupils dilated, the way his jaw tightened, the way his entire posture shifted from neutrality to something sharp and coiled. He was scenting her. Arya's stomach dropped. She knew what he would smell. Fear, yes, that was unavoidable. Sweat and blood and desperation. But underneath that, he'd smell her Omega nature, the markers that made her weak in the eyes of most alphas. Submissive. Breakable. He would smell what she was and cast her aside like everyone else had. But Adrian didn't move. Didn't order the guards to remove her. Didn't sneer or laugh or dismiss her. Instead, his expression darkened. Not with disgust. With something else. Something that made the air between them crackle like the storm building outside. His gaze swept over her. The torn shift, the bruises on her arms, the blood still trickling from the claw marks on her shoulder, her bare feet dirty and cut from running. She watched his eyes track every injury, every mark, and with each second that passed, the muscle in his jaw ticked harder. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, the kind of calm that barely concealed a storm. Who did this? It wasn't a question. Arya blinked, confusion cutting through her terror. Was he asking about the bruises? The blood? The torn clothing? One of the guards stepped forward, bowing his head. Your Majesty, this Omega escaped from the Blood Moon auction. She's disturbed the peace of your court and violated. I didn't ask you. The guard's mouth snapped shut. Adrian's eyes never left Arya. I asked her. The room had gone so quiet Arya could hear the rain lashing against the windows. Could hear her own pulse thundering in her ears. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. What was she supposed to say? How was she supposed to answer? Her mind was a tangle of panic and exhaustion, and this wasn't what she'd expected. She'd expected to be dragged away. Punished. Thrown back to the auction or worse. She hadn't expected the Alpha King to ask her anything at all. Adrian's expression shifted, something almost like patience softening the hard lines around his mouth. He moved then, lowering himself into a crouch so that he was closer to her level. Not quite eye to eye, he was still above her, still dominant, but close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his irises, could feel the heat radiating from his body. His scent hit her properly for the first time. Pine and smoke. Cold mountain air and something darker, earthier. It was overwhelming in its richness, a scent designed to make Omega submit, to bare their throats and lower their eyes. Arya's wolf stirred. For the first time in months, she felt it. A flicker of presence in the back of her mind, sluggish and weak, but there. Responding to him. No, she couldn't let that happen. She couldn't let her wolf decide this, couldn't let biology override the tiny scrap of control she still had. She tore her gaze away from his, staring instead at the black stone of the throne her arms were still wrapped around. "The auction," she whispered. Her voice came out hoarse, barely audible. They were going to sell me. I couldn't, I ran." Silence. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it, Adrian spoke again. "Your name." Aria's throat tightened. Giving him her name felt like handing over a piece of herself she could never get back. But refusing the Alpha King wasn't an option. Not when she was clinging to his throne, bleeding on his dais, surrounded by his guards. "Arya." She heard him inhale again, as if tasting her name on the air. "Arya," he repeated, and the way he said it, low and deliberate, almost reverent, sent a shiver down her spine. Behind them, someone cleared their throat. One of the advisors, an older man with silver hair and a pinched expression, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the law is clear. Omegas who flee the auction are considered stolen property. She must be returned so the proper transactions can be." Adrian's head turned toward the man, and whatever the advisor saw in the king's expression made him take an immediate step back. "Stolen property," Adrian repeated, his voice soft. "Dangerous." The advisor stammered. It's the law, Your Majesty. The auction houses are sanctioned by the crown and I know what they're sanctioned for." Adrian rose to his full height, and even though Arya wasn't the target of his attention, she felt the force of his presence like a physical weight. "I also know that the Blood Moon auction was created to find homes for unclaimed Omegas, not to brutalize them." He gestured toward Arya without looking at her. "Does she look home to you, counselor? Or does she look hunted?" The advisor's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Another voice cut in, this one belonging to a woman in deep red robes, her expression haughty. "With respect, Your Majesty, we cannot make exceptions. If word spreads that an Omega can simply run to the palace and claim sanctuary, then perhaps," Adrian interrupted, his tone glacial, "the auction houses should reconsider how they treat their charges." The woman's lips thinned, but she didn't argue further. Arya's mind reeled. He was defending her. The Alpha King, who had no reason to care about one runaway Omega, was arguing with his own council on her behalf. Why? She didn't understand. Couldn't understand. And then she heard it. The sound of boots on marble. Heavy. Multiple. The guards from the corridor had caught up. They appeared in the doorway of the throne room, 5 of them, led by a man Arya recognized with a jolt of nausea. The head auctioneer. The one whose throat she'd struck. He had a hand pressed to his neck, and his eyes burned with fury as they landed on her. "There," he snarled, pointing. "There's the little bitch who—" The growl that ripped from Adrian's throat was not human. It was pure alpha. Pure dominance. A sound that made every wolf in the room, noble and guard alike, freeze in place, heads instinctively lowering, shoulders hunching. Arya felt it in her bones, in her blood. Her wolf whimpered and pressed close to the surface, confused and overwhelmed. The auctioneer went pale. He dropped to one knee immediately, his hand falling from his throat. "Your Majesty, forgive me, I didn't mean." "You didn't mean to what?" Adrian's voice was soft again, but now Arya understood that softness for what it was. A blade wrapped in silk. "You didn't mean to speak of her that way? Or you didn't mean to get caught doing it?" The man's face went from pale to gray. "She's auction property, Your Majesty. She attacked me and fled. I have every right to. You have no rights in my throne room." Adrian descended the dais steps, moving with a predator's grace. "And she is no longer auction property." The words hung in the air like a bell that couldn't be unrung. Arya's heart stopped. The auctioneer's confusion mirrored her own. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. She hasn't been purchased, she hasn't been claimed." Adrian stopped 2 feet away from the man. Even kneeling, the auctioneer had to tilt his head back to look up at the king. "She claimed sanctuary at my throne," Adrian said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "Which, by the old laws, the laws that predate your auction houses and your contracts, means she is under my protection." Murmurs rippled through the room. Arya caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Hasn't invoked that law in decades. Can't possibly mean to. Just an omega. Adrian's eyes swept the room, and the whispers died. Furthermore, he continued, his gaze returning to the auctioneer, I am claiming her. The world tilted. Aria's grip on the throne tightened, her knuckles going white. Had she heard him correctly? Claiming her? The auctioneer's eyes widened. You're purchasing her? No. Adrian's voice dropped an octave, and Aria felt the word vibrate through her chest. I'm claiming her as mine. The distinction was clear. Purchasing was a transaction. Claiming was something else entirely. Something binding. Something that carried the weight of pack law and instinct. Aria couldn't breathe. The council erupted into protests. The auctioneer began stammering something about protocols and payments. The guards looked uncertainly at each other, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Through it all, Adrian stood utterly still, his presence commanding silence more effectively than any shout could have. And then he turned. His eyes found areas where she still knelt at the base of the throne, shaking and bleeding and lost. Slowly, he walked back up the dais steps. The crowd parted for him without thought, an unconscious acknowledgement of power. He stopped beside her. For a moment, he simply looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Then he extended his hand. Palm up. An offer, not a demand. Aria stared at it. At the long fingers, the calluses on his palm that spoke of someone who knew how to fight, how to wield weapons. At the veins that ran beneath tan skin, the strength contained in that single gesture. She knew what accepting that hand would mean. It would mean putting herself in his power. Trusting him. Binding herself to him in ways she didn't fully understand. But the alternative was going back to the auction. Back to the platform and the chains and the leering faces. Aria's hand trembled as she lifted it from the throne. The moment her fingers touched his, heat bloomed up her arm. Not painful, but intense. Electric. Adrian's fingers closed around hers, firm and warm, and he pulled her to her feet. Her legs shook. She swayed, exhausted and overwhelmed, and without thinking, her free hand came up to steady herself against his chest. The reaction was immediate. Adrian's entire body went rigid beneath her palm. She felt his heartbeat strong and fast. Too fast for someone who seemed so controlled, and when she dared to glance up at his face, she saw his pupils had dilated to the point where his eyes looked almost black. He was staring at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, or a miracle he didn't believe in. And then his free hand came up, fingers ghosting along her jawline so lightly she barely felt the touch. Who, he said, his voice rough, dared to mark you? He was looking at the bruises. The cuts. The evidence of hands that had grabbed and dragged and hurt. Aria's breath hitched. I don't. There were many. The auction house, they. His jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. Then he stepped back, releasing her hand but staying close enough to catch her if she fell. He turned to face the room, and when he spoke, his voice carried the full weight of his authority. The Blood Moon auction is suspended. Effective immediately. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The auctioneer lurched to his feet. Your Majesty, you can't, the tradition has stood for. I can. And I have. Adrian's eyes were cold. Any omega currently held by the auction houses is to be released. Those who wish to seek placement with packs may do so through the proper channels. Those who wish to leave are free to go. The council exploded into arguments. The nobles looked horrified. The auctioneer's face turned purple with rage. Adrian ignored them all. He turned back to Aria, and his expression softened. Just slightly. Just enough that she could see the person beneath the crown. You're safe now, he said quietly. I give you my word. And then, as the storm outside finally broke and rain hammered against the windows, as thunder shook the palace foundations, the Alpha King did something no one expected. He reached down, and with a gentleness that contradicted his size and power, he lifted Aria into his arms. She gasped, instinctively clutching at his shoulders. She wanted to protest, to insist she could walk, but the truth was she wasn't sure she could. Her legs felt like water, her vision swam, and the adrenaline that had carried her this far was finally draining away, leaving nothing but exhaustion in its wake. Adrian held her as if she weighed nothing, as if she were something precious. "The council will reconvene tomorrow," he announced to the room at large. "Until then, anyone who has issue with my decisions is welcome to bring them to me personally." The threat in his tone was clear: do so at your own risk. Then he carried her down the dais, through the parted crowd, past the pale-faced auctioneer and the stunned guards, and out of the throne room. The last thing Arya heard before the great doors closed behind them was a single voice cutting through the chaos. "She's mine now." His words, echoing through the chamber. A declaration. A promise. A vow. And as Arya's eyes fluttered closed, her head resting against the king's chest, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. If you're already hooked on Arya's story and want to see how far the Alpha King will go to protect what's his, hit that subscribe button for Shayla's romance library. Because this is only the beginning. The corridors beyond the throne room felt different when wrapped in the Alpha King's arms. Arya kept her eyes half closed, her cheek still pressed against Adrian's chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath the leather and fabric. She told herself she was too exhausted to protest, too drained to demand he put her down and let her walk on her own 2 feet like she had some dignity left. But the truth she didn't want to examine too closely, was that being carried felt safer than anything she'd experienced in months. And that terrified her almost as much as the auction had. Safety was an illusion. She'd learned that the hard way. People who offered protection always wanted something in return, and what they wanted from Omegas like her usually left scars that didn't show on skin. So why wasn't she fighting? Why wasn't she demanding answers, demanding to know what he meant by claiming her, what he expected, what price she'd have to pay for his intervention? "Because you're tired," a voice whispered in her mind. Tired of fighting. Tired of running. Tired of surviving alone. She pushed the voice away. Exhaustion made you weak. Made you vulnerable. Made you trust people who would only hurt you in the end. Adrian's grip on her shifted slightly, one arm beneath her knees, the other supporting her back, and Arya became acutely aware of how little the torn shift covered. How much of her skin was exposed to the cool air, to his touch. She should feel vulnerable. Exposed. Instead, the warmth radiating from him seemed to seep into her bones, chasing away the chill that had settled there during her time in the auction house's cold cells. They passed guards stationed along the hallway. Each one immediately bowed their head as Adrian approached, their eyes carefully averted. Not looking at him, that would be a challenge. And definitely not looking at her. Good. She didn't want their stares, their judgment, their curiosity. But she felt those stares anyway, prickling against her skin like needles even after they'd passed. The whispers would start soon. She knew how courts worked, even if she'd never been inside one before. By morning, every person in this palace would know that the Alpha King had claimed some ragged Omega who'd burst into his throne room. The speculation would spread like wildfire. Was she a lover? A charity case? A political move? Did it matter? She'd be the subject of gossip and rumor regardless. At least here, in Adrian's arms, she was away from the auction block. Away from the chains. For now, that had to be enough. Adrian turned down a quieter corridor, this one lit with fewer torches, the shadows deeper and longer. The sounds of the palace, the distant arguments from the throne room, the footsteps of servants, the general hum of activity, faded behind them. Arya's fingers twitched against his shoulder. "Where are you taking me?" Her voice came out rougher than she intended, scraped raw from screaming and gasping for air during her escape. Adrian's eyes flicked down to her, and for the first time since he'd picked her up, she got a clear look at his face. Up close, he was even more striking than she'd realized. Sharp features that looked carved rather than born. A small scar above his left eyebrow, barely visible. Lips that were surprisingly full for someone with such a hard expression. And those eyes. Pale gray, like winter frost, but there was something burning beneath the ice. Something he kept tightly controlled. "My personal quarters," he said simply. Arya's entire body went tense. What? You need medical attention. Food. Rest. His tone was matter-of-fact, as if this was the most logical conclusion in the world. And you need somewhere the council can't bother you while you recover. I don't, she stopped, unsure what she was even protesting. That she didn't need help? She clearly did. That she didn't want to be in his private rooms? That felt ungrateful considering he'd just saved her from being dragged back to the auction. I can't. It's not appropriate for me to. Appropriate, Adrian repeated, and there was something almost amused in his voice. Almost. You claimed sanctuary at my throne. You invoked laws that make you my direct responsibility. Where exactly do you think would be more appropriate than under my personal protection? He had a point. A frustrating, logical point that she couldn't argue with. Arya fell silent, her mind racing. His personal quarters. That meant his bedroom, his private space, the place where he was most himself. Without the crown and the court and the performances of kingship. The thought sent a confusing mix of emotions through her chest. Fear, yes, always fear when dealing with alphas who held all the power. But also something else. Something warm and fluttering that she desperately tried to crush before it could take root. You don't know him, she reminded herself. You don't know what he wants. What he'll expect. They reached a door at the end of the corridor, this one darker than the others, made of some wood so old it was nearly black. Intricate carvings covered its surface, wolves and moons, and what looked like ancient script she couldn't read. Adrian shifted her weight to one arm with an ease that spoke of his strength, and pushed the door open. The room beyond was not what Arya expected. She'd imagined opulence. Gold and jewels and excessive displays of wealth like the nobles wore. But Adrian's quarters were different. Spacious, yes. A fire crackled in a massive hearth on the far wall, casting dancing shadows across stone floors covered with furs and woven rugs. Furniture was minimal but well-crafted. A large desk covered in papers and maps, shelves lined with books, a seating area with deep chairs positioned near the fire. Windows along one wall showed the storm still raging outside, rain lashing against the glass, lightning occasionally illuminating the dark sky. And dominating the space was a bed. Massive, draped in dark fabrics, piled with furs that looked soft enough to sink into. Arya's heart kicked against her ribs. But Adrian carried her past the bed without a glance, heading instead toward a door on the left side of the room. He nudged it open with his shoulder, revealing a bathing chamber. This room was smaller, steam already rising from a large basin set into the floor. Someone had prepared it recently. The water was still hot, and Arya could smell herbs mixed into it. Lavender and something earthy, medicinal. Adrian finally set her down, but he kept one hand on her arm, steadying her as her feet touched the heated stone floor. "Bathe," he said quietly. "There are clothes in the cabinet. They'll be too large, but they're clean and warm." Arya stared at the water, then at him, confusion warring with suspicion. "You're leaving." His expression shifted. Something that might have been offense flickered across his features. "Did you expect me to stay and watch?" "I don't know what to expect from you." The words came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't take them back. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her. Really looked, as if trying to see past her skin to whatever lay beneath. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Fair enough." He stepped back, creating distance between them, and Arya felt the loss of his warmth immediately. "I'll send for the healer," he continued. "She'll tend to your injuries after you've cleaned up. In the meantime, I have some matters to attend to." His jaw tightened as he said it, and Arya wondered what matters he meant. The council, probably. The chaos his declaration had caused. The mess she'd created by running into his throne room. "I'm sorry," she found herself saying. Adrian's eyes snapped back to hers. "For what?" "For disrupting your court. For causing problems. For—" "Stop." The command in his voice made her jaw click shut. He moved closer again, and Arya fought the urge to step back, to maintain the distance. She held her ground, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes even though doing so made her feel small and exposed. You have nothing to apologize for, Adrian said, his voice low and intense. Do you understand me? Nothing. I broke into your throne room. You sought sanctuary. That's not a crime. I interrupted. Council meetings are interrupted daily, usually for far less important reasons. His eyes dropped to the bruises on her arms, the torn fabric barely clinging to her shoulder, and his expression hardened again. What was done to you, that's the crime. Not your escape from it. Aria's throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know how to process an alpha who looked at her like she was the wronged party instead of the problem. Why are you helping me? The question slipped out before she could stop it. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I'm just... Don't. His voice sharpened. Don't diminish yourself. Don't call yourself just anything. But I am. I'm just an Omega. Unwanted. My own father sold me to. Adrian's hand came up, not touching her but close, his fingers curling into a fist as if physically restraining himself. Your father, he said, each word carefully controlled, is a fool who didn't deserve you. The certainty in his voice stole Aria's breath. How could he say that? He didn't know her father. Didn't know her. Didn't know anything about her life or her pack or the reasons she'd ended up in that auction house. Unless... How do you know about my father? She asked slowly. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. He lowered his hand. The auction houses keep records, he said after a pause. Names. Origins. How each Omega came into their possession. That didn't answer her question. Not really. The auction houses might keep records, but why would the Alpha King have access to them? Why would he have looked? Have you? She hesitated, afraid of the answer. Have you been to the auctions before? No. The word was immediate and emphatic. Never. Then how? I receive reports. Adrian turned slightly, his profile illuminated by the soft light coming from the main room. About everything that happens in my kingdom. Including the auctions. Reports. Aria's mind spun. You get reports about every Omega who's sold? I get reports about activities I find concerning. And you find the auctions concerning? Yes. Then why haven't you stopped them before now? It was a bold question. Possibly too bold. But Aria was exhausted and confused and standing in the Alpha King's private bathing chamber wearing nothing but a torn shift, and she was tired of not understanding what was happening. Adrian's shoulders tensed. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. Rougher. Because I'm one man fighting a system that existed long before I took the throne. Because the council argues that the auctions serve a purpose, that they help Omegas who have nowhere else to go. Because every time I've tried to implement restrictions, I've been blocked by nobles who profit from the trade. He turned back to face her, and the frustration in his eyes was genuine. Raw. Because I've been trying to change things the right way. Through laws and regulations and political maneuvering. And it's been too slow. Too ineffective. Too. He trailed off, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Tonight you saw what happens when I stop trying to do things the right way, he finished. Aria absorbed this. The Alpha King, frustrated by his own council. Constrained by politics and tradition despite his power. It made him seem less untouchable. More real. More dangerous to her carefully guarded heart. So you suspended the auctions because I gave you an excuse, she said softly. No. Adrian's eyes locked on hers. I suspended the auctions because seeing you terrified and bleeding on my throne room floor made me realize that the right way was taking too long. That while I was being patient and political, Omegas were suffering. He took a breath, and when he continued, his voice was barely above a whisper. I suspended the auctions because the moment I caught your scent, everything else stopped mattering. Aria's heart stuttered. What? But Adrian was already moving toward the door, his expression shuddering closed again, walls slamming back into place. Bathe, he said without looking at her. I'll send the healer up. And Aria, he paused in the doorway. Lock the door behind me if it makes you feel safer. No one will bother you here. Then he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Aria stood frozen, his words echoing in her mind. The moment I caught your scent, everything else stopped mattering. What did that mean? What could it possibly mean? Omegas had sense, yes. Sense that told alphas about their status, their health, their fertility. But Adrian had reacted like. No. She wouldn't let herself think it. Wouldn't let herself hope for something that impossible, that dangerous. Mate bonds were rare. Lightning strike rare. And they certainly didn't happen between runaway Omegas with nothing to their name and alpha kings who could have anyone they wanted. She was reading too much into it. He'd helped her because he was a good man trying to do the right thing. That was all. It had to be all. Arya moved to the door on shaking legs and turned the lock. The click of it sliding into place sent a small wave of relief through her. Not that a lock would stop an alpha of Adrian's power if he wanted in. But the gesture mattered. He'd given her the choice. The illusion of control in a situation where she had none. That meant something. She turned back to the bath, steam still rising invitingly from the surface. Her reflection caught in a mirror mounted on the wall, and she barely recognized the girl staring back. Hair tangled and matted with dirt. Face pale except for a bruise blooming along her cheekbone. When had that happened? The shift hung in tatters, revealing more skin than it covered, and the skin it did reveal was a map of abuse. Fingerprint bruises on her upper arms. Scratches down her shoulder. Cuts on her feet from running barefoot through the palace. She looked like exactly what she was. A victim. Someone broken and used up. Arya's hands trembled as she peeled the ruined shift off, letting it fall to the floor in a heap of soiled fabric. She didn't want to be this person. Didn't want to see herself as someone who needed rescuing. But denying it wouldn't change reality. She stepped into the bath, and the heated water enveloped her like an embrace. For a moment, the temperature was almost too much against her cold skin, making her gasp. Then her body adjusted, and the warmth seeped deep, unknotting muscles she hadn't realized were clenched. Arya sank lower, submerging herself up to her chin. The herbs in the water stung the cuts on her skin, but in a way that felt cleansing. Purifying. She stayed there for a long time, letting the heat work its magic, letting herself feel safe even though she knew it was temporary. Eventually, she reached for the soap sitting on the edge of the basin plain, unscented, practical, and began washing away the grime of the auction house. The sweat of fear. The dirt of the streets she'd been dragged through. The phantom touch of hands that had grabbed and held and marked her as property. With each swipe of soap, each rinse of clean water, she felt a little more like herself. A little less like a thing to be bought and sold. By the time she finally climbed out of the bath, her skin was pink from heat and scrubbing, and the water had gone murky with dirt. The cabinet Adrian had mentioned stood against the far wall. Inside, she found simple clothes, linen shirts, soft trousers, even a few tunics. All far too large for her frame, clearly meant for someone with broader shoulders and longer limbs. Meant for Adrian. Arya pulled out the smallest shirt she could find and slipped it on. It hung past her thighs, the sleeves extending well beyond her fingertips. She had to roll them up multiple times before her hands appeared. The trousers were even more comically oversized, so she abandoned them in favor of just the shirt. It smelled like him. Pine and smoke and that dark, earthy undertone. She told herself it didn't matter. Told herself she didn't notice the way the scent made her wolf purr contentedly in the back of her mind. Told herself she was only wearing his clothes because there was nothing else available. A knock on the main door made her jump. "Miss?" A female voice, gentle and older. "His Majesty sent me." "I'm Healer Marin." Arya padded barefoot across the stone floor and cracked the door open. An older woman stood in the hallway, silver-haired and kind-eyed, carrying a leather bag that presumably held medical supplies. "May I come in?" Marin asked. Arya hesitated, then stepped back, allowing the healer entry. Marin's eyes swept over her, professional and assessing. "Let's sit you by the fire. We'll need good light to see what we're working with." For the next 20 minutes, Marin worked in quiet efficiency. She cleaned the claw marks on Arya's shoulder, applied a salve that smelled of mint and something sharper, and bandaged them carefully. She did the same for the cuts on Arya's feet, clucking her tongue at the damage. "You ran far," Marin observed. "Far enough." The healer's eyes softened. You're safe now, dear. His Majesty, well. I've served this court for 30 years, and I've never seen him react to anyone the way he reacted to you. Arya's hands clenched in the oversized shirt. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Meryn smiled gently. The king is many things strong, just sometimes too controlled for his own good. But he doesn't make impulsive decisions. And suspending the auctions, claiming you in front of the entire court, those were very impulsive decisions. He said he's been wanting to stop the auctions for a while. Perhaps. But wanting to do something and actually doing it are very different things. You were the catalyst, dear. Whether you intended to be or not. Arya didn't know what to say to that. Meryn finished her work, packing her supplies back into her bag. Get some rest. Your body's been through trauma, and it needs time to heal. I'll check on you tomorrow. She left as quietly as she'd arrived, and Arya was alone again in Adrian's quarters. The storm outside had intensified, thunder rattling the windows, rain coming down in sheets. But inside, the fire crackled warmly, and the furs on the bed looked impossibly inviting. Arya approached the bed slowly, running her fingers over the soft pelts. Wolf fur, she realized. From wolves who'd given their coats willingly after death, honored and remembered. She shouldn't sleep in his bed. It was too intimate, too presumptuous. But the floor was stone and her body ached, and Adrian had carried her here himself. Had told her to rest. So Arya climbed onto the massive bed, sinking into softness like she'd never felt before. She pulled the furs up around her shoulders, cocooning herself in warmth and that pine smoke scent that clung to everything. Just for a moment, she told herself. Just until he comes back and tells me where I'm actually supposed to sleep. But exhaustion was a heavy hand pressing down on her, and within minutes, Arya felt herself drifting. The last thought she had before sleep claimed her was of pale gray eyes and a voice like thunder. She's mine now. Arya woke to the sound of a door opening. Her eyes flew open, instinct screaming danger before her mind fully caught up. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely any light. The storm still raged outside, but quieter now, winding down. And someone was in the room. She sat up, her heart pounding, prepared to run again if she had to. It's just me. Adrian's voice, low and rough with what sounded like exhaustion. Arya's eyes adjusted to the dimness, and she made out his silhouette near the door. He hadn't moved further into the room, as if giving her space. Giving her the option to tell him to leave his own quarters. I'm sorry, she said automatically. I fell asleep. I'll move too. Stay. One word. Simple. Final. Where will you sleep? The chair is fine. Arya looked toward the seating area by the fire. The chairs there were large, but not nearly long enough for someone of Adrian's height to sleep comfortably in. That's ridiculous. This is your bed. And you're injured and exhausted. Stay, Arya. There was something in the way he said her name. Like it mattered. Like she mattered. She heard him move in the darkness, heard the sound of boots being removed, the rustle of fabric. Her cheeks heated as she realized he was undressing. But he stayed across the room, his movements careful and deliberate. Then she heard him settle into one of the chairs, heard the creak of leather and wood, heard his long exhale. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackling embers and the rain against the windows. The council wasn't happy, Adrian said finally. I gathered. They'll fight the suspension. Argue that I'm overstepping. That traditions exist for a reason. Will you reverse it? No. Such certainty. Such resolve. Even if it costs you politically? Especially then. Arya pulled the furs tighter around herself. I don't understand you. A low sound that might have been a laugh. That makes two of us. What does that mean? Silence. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. It means I caught your scent in that throne room, and my wolf recognized you before my mind could catch up. It means I looked at you clinging to my throne, terrified and defiant, and something in my chest just claimed you. It means I'm sitting across this room from you right now because if I get any closer, I don't trust myself not to do something you're not ready for. Arya's breath caught. Adrian. Sleep, Arya. We'll talk in the morning. When you've rested. When I've had time to figure out what this is. what this is. As if he was just as confused as she was. Just as overwhelmed. Somehow, that made her feel less alone. "Thank you," she whispered. "For saving me. For all of it." "You saved yourself," Adrian replied. "I just made sure you didn't have to keep running." And in the darkness of the Alpha King's quarters, wrapped in his furs and his scent, Arya finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found somewhere she could stop. Morning came softly, gray light filtering through the windows as the storm finally exhausted itself. Arya woke slowly, awareness returning in fragments. Warmth. Softness. The lingering scent of pine and smoke. For a brief, beautiful moment, she forgot where she was. Forgot everything that had happened. She was simply warm and safe, and reality crashed back in. The throne room. The chase. Adrian's declaration. His quarters. Her eyes snapped open, and she sat up too quickly, her bandaged shoulder protesting with a sharp sting. The bed was enormous around her, the furs tangled from restless sleep she didn't remember having. Across the room, the chair where Adrian had settled was empty, a blanket draped across its arm, the only evidence he'd been there at all. He was gone. The relief that flooded through her was immediately followed by something else. Something uncomfortably close to disappointment. Arya pushed the feeling away and climbed out of bed, her bare feet finding the soft rug. The oversized shirt she wore had twisted during the night, sliding off one shoulder, and she tugged it back into place as she padded toward the windows. The view stole her breath. From this height, she could see over the palace walls to the city beyond. Buildings sprawled in every direction, smoke rising from chimneys as the capital woke to the new day. In the distance, she could make out the dark line of forest that surrounded the city, and beyond that, mountains peaked with snow even though it was barely autumn. It was beautiful. Vast. A kingdom she'd never been part of, ruled by an alpha she'd never expected to meet. And now she was standing in his bedroom, wearing his clothes, under his protection. The absurdity of it made her want to laugh. Or cry. She wasn't sure which. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Miss Arya?" A young woman's voice, hesitant. "His Majesty sent me with breakfast and, well, proper clothing." Arya moved to the door, opening it to find a girl who couldn't be more than 17, carrying a tray laden with food and a bundle of fabric draped over her arm. She had warm brown eyes and dark hair pulled into a practical braid. "I'm Liana," the girl said with a small curtsy. "I'm to be your attendant. If you'll have me, that is." "My attendant?" Arya echoed, bewildered. "I don't need." His Majesty was quite insistent. Liana smiled gently. "And between you and me, it's easier to just accept help than to argue with him about it. He's stubborn as old stone when he makes up his mind about something." There was affection in her voice when she spoke of Adrian. Not romantic, more like the fondness of someone who'd known him a long time. Arya stepped back, allowing Liana to enter with her burdens. The girl set the tray on a small table near the fire and laid out the clothing on the bed. "I brought a few options since I wasn't sure of your size or preferences. The seamstress can make adjustments later, but these should do for now." Arya approached the bed slowly, running her fingers over the fabrics. Simple but well-made. Soft trousers in dark gray, a cream-colored shirt that looked like it would actually fit, a deep green tunic embroidered with subtle leaf patterns. Nothing ostentatious, but leagues above anything she'd owned in years. "I can't accept all this," Arya said quietly. "You can and you will." Liana's tone was cheerful but firm. "You're under the king's protection now. That comes with certain standards." Standards. As if Arya was someone worthy of standards instead of a runaway who'd stumbled into sanctuary by sheer desperation. But arguing felt exhausting, and the smell of food from the tray was making her stomach clench with sudden, fierce hunger. When had she last eaten? Before the auction, certainly. Maybe the day before that. Time had blurred in the cells. "Eat first," Liana encouraged, as if reading her thoughts. "Then we'll get you properly dressed. His Majesty requested your presence once you're ready." Arya's head snapped up. "Where is he?" "Council chambers." Apparently, there were some rather heated discussions this morning about last night's events. Lyanna's expression turned sympathetic. Don't worry. The king can handle them. He's dealt with worse than a few disgruntled nobles. Arya wanted to ask what could be worse than suspending a centuries-old tradition and claiming an unknown Omega in front of the entire court, but her stomach growled loudly, making the decision for her. She sat at the table and lifted the covers from the dishes. Bread, still warm. Soft cheese. Sliced fruit. A bowl of porridge with honey. Simple fare, but it looked like a feast to her. She ate slowly at first, then faster as her body remembered its hunger. Lyanna busied herself tidying the room, giving Arya privacy to eat without being watched. As she chewed, Arya's mind drifted. Last night, exhaustion had kept the memories at bay. But now, in the gray morning light with food in her belly and safety around her, the walls she'd built began to crack. And the past bled through. She'd been 12 when it first happened. The memory rose unbidden, sharp and clear as broken glass. The pack gathering had been in full swing, wolves of all ages celebrating the autumn hunt. Arya had been playing with the other children near the bonfire, laughing, carefree in the way only children could be. She'd had friends then. A place. Her mother was still alive. Her father still looked at her with something other than disgust. Then Marcus. A boy 2 years older, always too rough, always pushing boundaries, had grabbed her arm. Tried to shove her toward the fire as a joke, the kind of stupid, dangerous thing young wolves did to test each other's reflexes. Arya had panicked. Felt the heat too close to her skin. Felt fear spike through her chest. And something inside her had opened. She remembered the sensation even now, years later. Like a door she didn't know existed had suddenly swung wide, and something vast and ancient had poured out. Silver light had exploded from her hands. Not fire. Not exactly. Something colder. Brighter. It had hit Marcus square in the chest and sent him flying backward 15 feet, his body crashing into a tree with enough force to crack the bark. The laughter had died instantly. Everyone had stared at her. At her hands, still glowing with that strange silver light. At Marcus, unconscious and bleeding. At the scorch marks on the ground where the light had touched. Arya had looked down at her palms, terrified and confused, and watched the light fade like dying stars. Her mother had rushed to her, pulling her close, whispering frantically that it would be all right, that they would figure it out. Her father had stood frozen, his expression unreadable. The pack elders had convened immediately. Arya remembered being brought before them, her mother's hand tight around hers, the old wolves examining her with eyes that held more fear than curiosity. She bears the old mark, one of them had said, voice trembling. The silver light. It hasn't been seen in generations. What does it mean? Her mother had asked. It means she's dangerous. Power like that, in one so young, untrained, it will destroy her. Or destroy us. They debated for hours. Some wanted her sent away immediately. Others argued for containment, for trying to train her, to suppress the power until she was old enough to control it. In the end, they'd decided on suppression. A pack which had performed a binding ritual, wrapping silver chains around Arya's wrists and chanting in a language she didn't understand. The chains had burned, searing her skin, and when they'd finally been removed, they'd left scars. Thin silver lines circling both wrists like shackles. The scars had faded over the years, visible only if you knew to look for them. But Arya felt them every day. Felt the binding that had been placed on her power, locking it away deep inside where it couldn't hurt anyone. Where she couldn't be herself. After that night, everything had changed. The other children had been afraid of her. Parents had told their kids to stay away, whispered that she was cursed, touched by something unnatural. Her friends had abandoned her one by one until she'd been left alone. Her father had grown distant. Cold. He looked at her like she was a stranger. A problem he hadn't asked for. Only her mother had remained constant. Had held her when she cried. Had told her she was special, not cursed. That the silver light was a gift, even if the pack couldn't see it. But her mother had died when Arya was 15. Fever had taken her, quick and merciless. And with her death, the last thread connecting Arya to the pack had severed. Her father had barely spoken to her after that, had given her the coldest corner of their home, the smallest portions of food, the hardest chores. He'd made it clear without words that she was a burden, an embarrassment. The pack had followed his lead. Arya had become invisible, a ghost moving through a community that wanted nothing to do with her. She'd tried to be useful, tried to work harder, be quieter, take up less space. Tried to prove she wasn't dangerous, wasn't cursed. It hadn't mattered. And then, 3 months ago, her wolf had stopped speaking to her. She'd woken one morning and realized the presence that had always been there, quiet and subdued because of the binding, but there, was simply gone. Silent. As if her wolf had given up on her too. The loss had been devastating. A loneliness so profound it felt like dying. 2 weeks after that, her father had told her she was being sent to the auction house. It's for the best, he'd said, not meeting her eyes. You'll find a place somewhere. Someone will take you in. He'd meant someone would buy her. Use her. Own her. And he hadn't cared. The auction house had been worse than Arya had imagined. Cold cells. Barely enough food. Other Omegas who were just as broken and terrified as she was. The handlers had been cruel in casual ways. Rough hands, degrading comments, the constant reminder that they were property now, not people. She'd spent weeks there, waiting for the blood moon. Waiting to be sold. Until last night, when desperation had finally overridden fear, and she'd run. Arya blinked, realizing her cheeks were wet. She wiped at the tears roughly, angry at herself for crying. The past was past. It couldn't be changed, couldn't be fixed. All she could do was survive it. Except she wasn't sure she knew how to do anything except survive anymore. Wasn't sure if there was anything left of her beyond the girl who'd learned to make herself small and quiet and invisible. Miss Arya? Lyanna's gentle voice pulled her back to the present. The girl was watching her with concerned eyes, clearly having noticed the tears. I'm fine, Arya said automatically. You don't have to be. Lyanna moved closer, her expression kind. Not here. Not with me. And definitely not with His Majesty. Arya let out a shaky breath. He doesn't know me. Doesn't know what I am. What you are. Lyanna tilted her head. You're an Omega who survived something terrible. That's what I see. I'm more than that. Or I was. I don't know anymore. Arya looked down at her wrists, at the faint silver scars that circled them. I'm dangerous. Lyanna was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, she said, His Majesty is one of the most powerful alphas in the realm. I don't think he frightens easily. He should be frightened of me. Then perhaps you should tell him why. Let him decide for himself. The thought of telling Adrian about the silver light, about the binding, about why her own pack had rejected her, it made Arya's stomach twist with anxiety. What would he do when he learned she was damaged? Broken? That the power inside her was locked away but still there, still waiting? Would he regret claiming her? Send her away? Part of her whispered that it would be better if he did. Better to be rejected now than to let herself hope for something that couldn't last. But another part, smaller, quieter, desperately fragile, wanted to stay. Wanted to see if maybe, just maybe, someone could look at her and see past the curse to whatever else she might be. Come on, Lyanna said softly. Let's get you dressed. His Majesty is waiting, and trust me, the longer we take, the more he'll worry. He doesn't seem like the worrying type. Lyanna's smile was knowing. You'd be surprised. 20 minutes later, Arya stood in front of a mirror, barely recognizing herself. The clothes fit properly, the trousers comfortable and allowing movement, the shirt soft against her healing skin, the tunic adding a layer of warmth and dignity. Lyanna had brushed out her hair, working through the tangles with patient care, and now it fell in dark waves past her shoulders. She looked almost normal, almost like a person instead of a problem. But her eyes told a different story. They were too haunted, too old for her 20 years. They held shadows that nice clothes couldn't cover. You look lovely, Lyanna said. I look like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. Maybe you're pretending to be exactly who you are, and you've just forgotten what that looks like. The words hit harder than Arya expected. She turned away from the mirror before the emotions swelling in her chest could overflow. Where am I supposed to meet him? I'll take you to the council chambers. But Miss Arya, Lyanna's hand touched her arm gently. The council will try to intimidate you. Make you feel small. Don't let them. You have every right to be there. Arya wasn't sure she believed that. But she nodded anyway. The walk through the palace was surreal. In daylight, the corridors looked less ominous, more grand. Servants moved efficiently through the halls, nodding respectfully as Lyanna and Arya passed. A few shot Arya curious looks, but no one stared outright. Still, Arya felt exposed. Watched. She kept her eyes forward, her shoulders straight, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. They reached a set of heavy wooden doors, ornately carved with the kingdom's crest. Voices filtered through, raised, argumentative. Lyanna gave her an encouraging smile. Good luck. Then she knocked twice and pushed the door open. The council chamber was smaller than the throne room, but no less imposing. A long table dominated the center, surrounded by high-backed chairs occupied by nobles and advisors. Maps and documents littered the table's surface. And at the head of it all, standing rather than sitting, was Adrian. He'd changed clothes since last night, dark trousers and a deep blue shirt, his hair tied back loosely. He looked every inch the king, authority radiating from him like heat. His eyes found Arya immediately, and something in his expression softened. Just for a moment. Just enough for her to see the relief there. He'd been worried. Lyanna had been right. Said a voice dripping with disdain. The older advisor from last night, the one who'd tried to invoke property laws. The Omega joins us. How unexpected. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. A few looked openly hostile. Others simply looked confused, as if they couldn't understand why she was there at all. Adrian's gaze moved from Arya to the advisor, and his expression hardened. Counselor Thorne, you will address her with respect. Or you will leave. Thorne's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head stiffly. Of course, Your Majesty. Adrian gestured to an empty chair beside his own. Arya, please sit. Every eye in the room tracked her as she walked to the chair. She felt their judgment, their curiosity, their resentment. Felt the weight of being the outsider who'd disrupted their carefully ordered world. But she held her head high and took the seat Adrian offered. He remained standing, his presence a shield between her and the council's scrutiny. Now, Adrian said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. We were discussing the transition plan for the Omegas currently held by the auction houses. Counselor Marcus, you had concerns. A middle-aged man with graying temples cleared his throat. Your Majesty, the logistics alone are significant. We're talking about hundreds of Omegas across multiple houses. Where will they go? Who will be responsible for them? They'll go wherever they choose, Adrian replied. And they'll be responsible for themselves, like any other citizen of this kingdom. But Omegas need pack structure need to be treated like people capable of making their own decisions. Adrian's tone left no room for argument. The Crown will establish a fund to help those who need temporary housing or resources while they find their footing. Those who wish to join packs can do so through proper channels, with contracts that protect their rights. This will cost a fortune, another counselor interjected. Then we'll find the money. From where? The treasury is all ready. From the fees we've been collecting from the auction houses. Adrian's smile was sharp. All those transaction taxes and licensing costs. They should more than cover the expenses. Murmurs rippled around the table. Arya watched the play of emotions across various faces, surprise, calculation, frustration. She realized with a start that Adrian had planned this. Had probably been planning it long before last night. She'd just given him the catalyst he needed to push it through. Thorne leaned forward. Your Majesty, with all due respect, this isn't just about money. It's about tradition. Order. The auction system has existed for too long. Adrian's voice cut through the protest. And it ends now. The decree has already been drafted. I'll sign it this afternoon. The noble houses won't stand for this, Thorne said, his voice rising. Many of them have interests in the auction houses. They'll see this as what? An attack on their profits from selling people. Adrian's eyes were cold. Then let them be offended. I'm more concerned with justice than their comfort. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Arya sat very still, watching the Alpha King dismantle centuries of tradition with quiet, ruthless efficiency. This was a side of him she hadn't seen last night, not the protector who'd carried her to safety, but the ruler who commanded a kingdom. It should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something else. Something warm and fierce and dangerously close to admiration. If there are no further productive comments, Adrian said, his tone making it clear the discussion was over, this council is dismissed. The decree will be posted by nightfall. Chairs scraped against stone as the council members rose, most of them leaving quickly, a few lingering to shoot dark looks in Arya's direction. She ignored them, her attention fixed on Adrian as he gathered some of the documents from the table. When the last counselor had filed out, leaving them alone, Adrian finally sat in the chair beside her. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. That went well, he said dryly. Arya found herself smiling despite everything. They hate me. They fear change. You just happen to be the face of it. He turned to look at her fully, his gaze searching. How are you feeling? Marin said you were healing well, but I'm fine. The lie came automatically. Adrian's eyebrow rose. Are you? And there it was again. That impossible ability, he seemed to have to see right through her carefully constructed walls. Arya looked away, her fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table. I don't know how to be here. Don't know what you expect from me, or what happens next, or... She trailed off, overwhelmed by the enormity of her situation. What if I told you I don't expect anything? Adrian said quietly. I'd say you were lying. Everyone expects something. Fair enough. He leaned back in his chair, considering. Then I expect you to heal. To rest. To stop looking over your shoulder like you expect to be dragged back to that auction house. That's all. For now. His expression grew more serious. Arya, I meant what I said last night. You're under my protection. That's not conditional. You don't have to earn it or prove you're worthy of it. It simply is. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that it could be that simple. But nothing in her life had ever been simple. You don't know me, she said softly. Don't know what I am. What I've done. Then tell me. The invitation hung in the air between them. Arya's heart pounded. This was the moment. The choice. She could deflect, change the subject, keep her secrets locked away where they'd been for years. Or she could take a risk. Show him the truth and see if he still wanted to protect her after. She looked at her wrists, at the faint silver scars barely visible against her skin. I was 12, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, when they realized I was dangerous. And for the first time in 8 years, Arya told someone the whole truth. She told him about the silver light, about Marcus and the bonfire, about the binding ritual that had locked her power away, about her mother's death and her father's rejection, about the years of isolation, of being feared and unwanted by her own pack, about the wolf that had stopped speaking to her, about being sold like property to the auction house. Adrian listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. Arya couldn't bring herself to look at him directly, afraid of what she'd see. Disgust? Fear? Regret? When she finally fell silent, the room felt heavy with words spoken and truths laid bare. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. Then, carefully, he reached across the space between them and took her hand. Arya's breath caught as he turned it palm up, his thumb tracing the silver scar around her wrist. They tried to break you, he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. Tried to bury what made you unique because they were too afraid to understand it. They were protecting the pack. They were protecting themselves. His eyes lifted to meet hers, and the intensity there stole her breath. You were a child. You needed guidance, training, support. Instead, they gave you chains and shame. The power is dangerous. Power is always dangerous. That doesn't make it evil. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. Do you still feel it? The silver light? Arya nodded slowly. Sometimes. like it's buried deep, waiting. But the binding holds it back. And your wolf. Silent. For months now. Adrian was quiet, his expression thoughtful. What if, he said carefully, the binding is why your wolf went silent? What if suppressing one part of you suppressed both? The thought had never occurred to her. She'd assumed her wolf had abandoned her, given up in the face of endless rejection. But what if Adrian was right? What if the binding that was supposed to protect her had been slowly suffocating everything that made her whole? I don't know how to undo it, she whispered. I don't even know if it can be undone. Then we'll find out. Together. Together. Such a simple word. But it meant everything. Arya looked at their joined hands, her small and scarred, his large and strong, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not the power. Something else. Something that had been locked away just as tightly. Hope. Why are you doing this? She asked. Why do you care? Adrian's smile was soft, almost sad. Because when I caught your scent last night, my wolf recognized you. Because when I saw you clinging to my throne, terrified and defiant, something in me just knew. Because you deserve better than what you've been given. He paused, his thumb still tracing gentle patterns on her wrist. And because, he added quietly, I think maybe fate brought you to my throne room for a reason. I just don't know what that reason is yet. Fate. Destiny. The old stories her mother used to tell. Arya had stopped believing in those things years ago. But sitting here, her hand in Adrian's, the weight of his attention like a warm shield around her. Maybe she could learn to believe again. 3 days passed in a strange liminal space between captivity and freedom. Arya remained in Adrian's quarters, though he insisted on sleeping in the chair by the fire despite her protests. During the days, she wandered the palace gardens under Lyanna's watchful eye, feeling like a ghost haunting rooms she had no right to occupy. The servants were polite but distant. The nobles who caught sight of her whispered behind their hands. She existed in a bubble of uncertainty, waiting for the moment Adrian would realize his mistake and send her away. But that moment never came. Instead, he ate breakfast with her each morning before council meetings. Asked about her healing shoulder, her dreams, her thoughts on books from his personal library. Treated her like she mattered, like her opinions held weight. It was disorienting. Wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. On the 4th morning, Adrian appeared at the door earlier than usual, dressed not in his formal court attire, but in simple riding clothes, dark leather and worn boots, his hair loose around his shoulders. Come with me, he said without preamble. Arya looked up from the book she'd been reading, startled. Where? Somewhere I should have taken you days ago. His expression was serious, but not unkind. Somewhere that might have answers about your silver light. Her heart kicked against her ribs. What kind of answers? The kind that have been buried in old stories for too long. He moved into the room, his presence filling the space as it always did. There's a place in the ancient forest. A shrine. My grandmother used to take me there when I was young, told me stories about the first wolves, the moon's gifts, the powers that existed before the packs divided into what we are now. And do you think this place will tell us something about me? I think if there's anywhere that holds knowledge about silver light and old magic, it's there. He paused, his gray eyes searching hers. But only if you want to go. I won't force you to face something you're not ready for. Arya closed the book slowly, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to refuse, to stay in the safety of ignorance. If she didn't know what the silver light meant, she could continue pretending it was just a curse. Just a mistake of biology. But another part, the part that had been slowly waking up since the night she'd claimed sanctuary at his throne, wanted to know. Needed to understand what had been locked inside her all these years. I want to go, she said. Adrian's smile was small but genuine. Then get dressed. We leave within the hour. They rode out from the palace as the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Arya had been given a gentle mare, gray-coated and patient, who seemed to sense her nervousness and compensated with steady calm. She hadn't ridden much. Her father's pack had considered horses a luxury Omegas didn't need, but the mare made it easy, following Adrian's black stallion without requiring much guidance. 2 guards accompanied them at a distance, far enough to provide security but not so close as to overhear conversations. Adrian had insisted on their presence despite Aria's protest that she didn't need protecting. "It's not just for you," he'd said quietly. "There are wolves in this kingdom who would see my suspension of the auctions reversed by any means necessary, including harming the one who inspired it." The thought had sent ice through her veins. She hadn't considered that she might have become a target simply by existing in Adrian's orbit. They rode through the city first, past shops opening for the day, past market squares where vendors called out their wares. People stopped to watch them pass. The Alpha King was unmistakable, and news of the strange Omega he'd claimed had spread like wildfire through the capital. Arya kept her eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the stares. Beside her, Adrian sat easy in his saddle, one hand on the reins, utterly unconcerned with the attention. Once they cleared the city gates, the landscape opened up. Rolling hills gave way to denser forest, the road narrowing to a well-worn path that disappeared into shadows beneath ancient trees. The temperature dropped as they entered the forest proper. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in fragmented beams, illuminating patches of moss and fern. The air smelled of earth and growing things, rich and alive. Arya felt something shift in her chest as they moved deeper into the woods. A pulling sensation, subtle but persistent, like a thread tugging at her sternum. "Do you feel it?" Adrian asked, his voice quiet so as not to disturb the forest's peace. "Feel what?" "The forest. It's old here. Older than the kingdom, older than the packs. Some say it remembers everything that's ever happened beneath its branches." He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. Those sensitive to magic often feel it more strongly. Arya wanted to deny that she felt anything. But the pulling sensation was growing stronger with each step the horses took, and lying seemed pointless. "It feels like it's calling," she admitted softly. Adrian nodded as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. "The shrine is at the heart of the old forest, where the first wolves are said to have received the moon's blessing. If the magic recognizes you..." He trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. If the magic recognized her. As what? A threat? A mistake? Or something else entirely? They rode in companionable silence for another hour, the path growing narrower, more overgrown. The guards had fallen back further, giving them space. Eventually, Adrian dismounted near a cluster of standing stones that looked like they'd been placed deliberately, though time had worn them smooth. "We walk from here," he said, offering his hand to help Arya down. She took it, trying to ignore the now familiar spark that jumped between them at contact. Her feet found solid ground, and she looked around, taking in the strange stillness of this part of the forest. Nothing moved. No bird sang. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "This way." Adrian didn't release her hand, and Arya didn't pull away. They walked between the standing stones, and the moment they passed the threshold, the air changed. Became thicker, charged with something Arya had no name for. The pulling sensation in her chest intensified, no longer subtle. It felt like a hook behind her ribs, drawing her forward with insistent purpose. Her feet moved faster, matching Adrian's longer stride. The forest around them grew older, the trees massive and gnarled, their roots breaking through the earth like the bones of sleeping giants. Strange flowers bloomed in patches of shadow, white and luminescent, giving off a faint glow even in daylight. And then they emerged into a clearing. Arya stopped so suddenly that Adrian's hand slipped from hers. She barely noticed, her entire attention captured by what lay before her. The shrine. It wasn't a building in any conventional sense. Instead, it was a natural amphitheater formed by ancient stones that rose from the earth in a perfect circle. At the center stood an altar carved from a single piece of silver-veined obsidian, its surface polished smooth by centuries of wind and rain and reverent hands. Behind the altar, the largest tree Arya had ever seen stretched toward the sky, its trunk wider than 10 men standing with linked arms. The bark was pale, almost white, and carved into it were symbols, spirals and crescents, wolves and moons, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves when she looked at them directly. But it was the light that stole her breath. Silver light, just like the power that lived locked inside her, emanated from the carvings, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Like the tree itself was alive and dreaming. "By the moon," Arya whispered. Adrian stepped up beside her, his expression reverent. "My grandmother said this place was where the first Alpha received the gift of transformation from the moon goddess herself, where mortal became wolf, and the two were bound together forever." Arya couldn't tear her eyes from the silver light. It called to something deep inside her, something that had been sleeping for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Her wolf stirred. It was the faintest whisper of presence, barely there, but it was something. The first movement she'd felt in months. "Arya?" Adrian's voice held concern. "What's wrong?" "My wolf," she breathed. "I can feel her. Just barely, but she's there." Adrian's hand found her shoulder, steadying. "The shrine is responding to you." "How's that possible?" "I'm nobody. Just an omega with a curse they couldn't explain." "You're not nobody." His voice was firm. "And I'm beginning to think your silver light was never a curse at all." Before Arya could respond, the silver light from the tree pulsed brighter. Once, twice, 3 times. And then a voice spoke. Not aloud. Arya heard it in her mind, ancient and layered, as if 1,000 voices spoke in unison. "Child of silver. Daughter of the old light. You have come home." Arya stumbled backward, her hand flying to her chest. Did you hear that?" Adrian's eyes were wide, his face pale. "Yes." The light pulsed again, and this time Arya felt warmth spread through her chest. Not painful, but intense. Like something inside her was waking up, stretching after a long sleep. "The binding weakens here," the voice continued. "The chains forged by fear cannot hold in the presence of the first tree." Arya looked down at her wrists and gasped. The silver scars that circled them, faded and barely visible for years, were glowing. Bright and clear, they looked less like scars and more like marks of power. Like the symbols carved into the tree. "What's happening to me?" Panic edged her voice. Adrian moved closer, his presence a solid anchor in the midst of strangeness. "Whatever it is, I'm right here. You're not alone." The voice spoke again, and this time it seemed to carry amusement. "The Alpha stands guard over what he does not yet understand." "Good. She will need his strength for what comes." "What comes?" Adrian demanded, addressing the tree directly. "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, the silver light began to move. It flowed down from the tree like liquid starlight, pooling on the ground, spreading across the clearing in intricate patterns. Everywhere it touched, symbols appeared in the earth, the same symbols from the tree, the same ones glowing on Arya's wrists. And as the light spread, images began to form. Not solid, but translucent. Memories or visions, Arya couldn't tell which. She saw wolves running beneath a moon that shone pure silver. Saw a woman standing at this very altar, her hands raised, silver light pouring from her palms to the sky. Saw the woman transform, but not into a normal wolf, into something larger, something that seemed to be made of light itself. Saw the woman's eyes and recognized the color. The same unusual shade of amber Arya saw every time she looked in a mirror. "That's..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "The first bearer of the silver light," the voice confirmed. "Your ancestor. The one who walked between worlds, who carried the moon's blessing in her very blood." "I don't understand," Arya said, her voice shaking. "If she was blessed, why did my pack say I was cursed?" "Because memory fades. Because fear replaces knowledge when generations forget their own stories." The vision changed, showing the silver-eyed woman training others, teaching them to harness their gifts. Then darkness creeping in, wolves turning against the light bearers, driving them out. They were feared for their power. Hunted. The bloodline scattered, the gifts suppressed, until only fragments remained. Until the light became so rare that those who bore it were called cursed instead of chosen. Tears streamed down Arya's face. All those years of isolation, of being told she was wrong, broken, dangerous, and she'd been carrying a gift. A legacy. Why show me this now? She asked the tree, the voice, the ancient presence that filled this place. Why not before? Because you were not ready. Because you had not yet found the one who would stand with you when the darkness comes. Adrian's hand tightened on her shoulder. What darkness? The vision shifted again, and what Arya saw made her blood run cold. Shadows spreading across the land. Wolves turning on each other, packs falling into chaos. And at the center of it all, a figure shrouded in darkness, its eyes burning red with malice. The old enemy wakes, the voice said, and for the first time, Arya heard something like fear in it. The one who sought to extinguish the light before. It stirs in the deep places, gathering strength. And when it rises, only the child of silver can stand against it. No. Arya shook her head violently. No, you have the wrong person. I can't even access my power. I can't. You can. The binding weakens. Your wolf wakes. The Alpha King stands at your side. You have everything you need. I have nothing, Arya shot back, anger and fear making her voice sharp. I'm just trying to survive. I can't save anyone. I can't even save myself. Adrian turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders, his eyes intense. Listen to me. I don't know what that thing is, or what it means about darkness coming. But I know you're stronger than you think. I've seen it. You survived your pack's rejection. Survived the auction house. Ran through an entire palace full of guards and made it to the throne room on sheer will alone. That's not weakness, Arya. That's power. It's desperation, she whispered. Sometimes they're the same thing. He glanced at the tree, at the silver light still pulsing gently, then back to her. We don't have to understand all of this right now. We don't have to solve ancient prophecies today. But we can take the first step. What first step? Learning to access your power. Understanding what you're capable of. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, wiping away a tear. Let the binding break. See what happens when you stop holding yourself back. The thought terrified her. She'd spent 8 years with her power locked away, had learned to function with that emptiness inside her. Letting it free meant losing control, meant risking hurting someone the way she'd hurt Marcus. But it also meant finally being whole. Finally hearing her wolf's voice again. Finally understanding what she was meant to be. The choice is yours, child of silver, the voice said gently. I cannot force the light to wake. Only you can call it forth. Arya looked at Adrian, at the absolute certainty in his expression. He believed she could do this. Believed she was more than the broken Omega her pack had discarded. Maybe it was time she started believing it too. If I do this, she said slowly, and something goes wrong. It won't. But if it does, then I'll be right here to help you through it. Adrian's smile was small but fierce. I'm not afraid of your power, Arya. I'm only afraid of you never claiming it. She took a shaky breath and turned back to the altar, to the ancient tree with its silver light. What do I do? She asked the voice. Place your hands upon the altar. Open yourself to what waits inside. And speak the words your blood remembers, even if your mind has forgotten. Arya approached the obsidian altar on trembling legs. Adrian stayed close, but didn't crowd her, giving her space to make this choice herself. She placed her palms flat against the cold stone. Immediately, the silver marks on her wrists flared bright. Heat rushed up her arms, not burning but intense, like molten starlight flowing through her veins. She gasped, her fingers curling against the stone. Speak, the voice urged. Call to what was locked away. Words rose in Arya's throat, words she'd never learned but somehow knew. Ancient words in a language that predated the packs, that belonged to the first wolves and the moon that blessed them. She Marin Velon. Lumos en Shara. Valkara Nem Sulthan. Light. Break the chains. I claim what is mine. The silver scars on her wrists cracked. Not her skin, the scars themselves. Fissures appeared in the glowing marks like breaking glass, and through the cracks, pure silver light began to pour. Arya cried out, not in pain but in overwhelming sensation. It felt like breathing for the first time after nearly drowning. Like hearing music after years of silence. Like coming home. The light spread from her wrists up her arms, across her shoulders, down through her chest. It illuminated her from within, making her skin translucent, showing the network of power that had always been there, buried and bound and waiting. And in the back of her mind, clear and strong and joyful. Sister, you're back. I'm here. We're whole. Her wolf. No longer silent. No longer buried. Awake and wild and crying with relief. Arya sobbed, overwhelmed by the presence she'd thought lost forever. I can hear you. I can hear you. I never left. I was just trapped with the light. But we're free now. We're finally free. The silver light from the tree pulsed in response to Arya's awakening, the two lights resonating, harmonizing. The symbols carved into the bark glowed brighter, and the entire clearing was bathed in silver radiance. Adrian stood watching, or written across his face. He didn't approach, didn't try to touch her. Seemed to understand instinctively that this moment belonged to Arya alone. The light continued to build, growing brighter and brighter until Arya was certain it would burst from her skin, would consume her entirely. And then it settled. Like a wild river finding its banks, the power flowed into a steady current inside her. Still there, still immense, but contained. Manageable. Hers. Arya lifted her hands from the altar and stared at them in wonder. The silver scars were gone, replaced by thin lines of light that pulsed with her heartbeat. And when she focused on them, really concentrated, she felt the power respond. Light gathered in her palms, soft and silvery, cool rather than hot. She turned her hands over, watching it pool in her cupped fingers like liquid moon. I did it, she whispered. I actually. Well done, child of silver, the voice said, and this time Arya heard warmth in it. Pride. You have taken the first step. There are many more ahead, and the road will not be easy. But you are no longer alone. You have your wolf. Your power. And the voice seemed to shift its attention, your mate. Arya's eyes snapped to Adrian. What? Adrian had gone very still, his expression carefully neutral. I didn't want to say anything. Didn't want to pressure you when you were already dealing with so much. Say what? He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. The night you came to the throne room, when I caught your scent, my wolf recognized you immediately. Knew what you were to me. To us. Arya's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break free of her chest. What am I to you? Adrian stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could feel his warmth, see the silver of her light reflected in his gray eyes. Mine, he said simply. My mate. The other half of my soul. The one I've been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. The words should have frightened her. Should have sent her running. Mate bonds were serious, permanent, binding in ways that went beyond choice or logic. But as Arya stood there, her power finally free, her wolf finally singing in her mind, looking at the Alpha King who'd protected her without asking for anything in return. It felt right. It felt like the missing piece clicking into place. I don't know how to be someone's mate, she admitted quietly. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Then we'll figure it out together. At whatever pace you need. Adrian extended his hand, palm up, the same offer he'd made in the throne room. I'm not going anywhere, Arya. Whether you accept the bond now or a year from now, I'm yours. That doesn't change. Arya looked at his hand, then at the silver light still glowing softly in her own palms. Two kinds of power. Two halves of something larger. She placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, light flared. Not just her silver, but something golden that radiated from Adrian, alpha power meeting moon-blessed magic. The two lights twined together, dancing around their joined hands, and Arya felt the bond snap into place. Not chains. Not binding her or trapping her. Wings. Lifting her higher than she could reach alone. The ancient voice spoke one last time, fading as the vision around them began to dim. The child of silver and the Alpha King. Together, you may be enough to face what comes. Guard her well, Alpha. She carries the light the world will need. The silver radiance from the tree faded, the symbols in the earth disappeared, and the clearing returned to normal. Just ancient stones and an old tree, no trace of the magic that had filled the space moments before. Except for the light still glowing beneath Aria's skin. Proof that what happened had been real. She looked up at Adrian, her hand still in his, and saw him smiling. "How do you feel?" he asked. Aria took inventory. Her wolf was present and content in her mind. The power flowed through her veins like it had always belonged there. And the bond, new and strange, but undeniably real, hummed between her and the Alpha King. Terrified, she admitted. Overwhelmed. But also, Adrian prompted gently. She smiled, small but genuine. Also whole. For the first time in 8 years, I feel whole. Good. He raised their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Because you are. And I'm going to make sure you never forget it. As they stood in the ancient clearing, silver and gold light still shimmering faintly around them, Aria allowed herself to hope that maybe the voice was right. Maybe together, they could face whatever darkness was coming. Maybe she really was more than the broken Omega who'd stumbled into a throne room 4 days ago. Maybe she was exactly what the world needed, even if she didn't quite believe it yet. The ride back to the palace felt different. Aria sat straighter in her saddle, her body humming with the power that no longer hid beneath bindings and fear. The forest seemed to lean toward her as they passed, as if the trees themselves recognized what had awakened inside her. Her wolf prowled contentedly in her mind, occasionally offering observations about scents on the wind or the way Adrian kept glancing at her to make sure she was all right. "He's worried," her wolf murmured. "Protective." It's annoying and endearing at the same time. Aria found herself smiling. Having her wolf back was like rediscovering a part of herself she'd forgotten existed. The loneliness that had been her constant companion for months had lifted, replaced by a presence that understood her completely. "I missed you," she thought. "I missed you too, sister. And I'm never leaving again. I promise." They emerged from the forest as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The capital sprawled before them, smoke rising from 1,000 chimneys, the palace standing proud at its heart. "Home," some part of Aria whispered. Though she'd only been there a handful of days, the word felt right in a way nothing had in years. But as they approached the city gates, something felt wrong. The guards stationed there were clustered together, speaking in low, urgent voices. When they spotted Adrian's approach, they immediately bowed, but their faces were tight with tension. "Your Majesty," the senior guard said, his voice strained. "Thank the moon you've returned. The council has called an emergency gathering. The throne room is full of pack leaders from across the kingdom." Adrian's expression darkened. "I wasn't informed of any gathering." "It was called this morning, sire. After you'd already departed." The guard's eyes flicked to Aria, then quickly away. "They're demanding an audience. Saying it can't wait." Demanding. The word came out flat, dangerous. "I see." Aria's stomach nodded. This was about her. Had to be. For days since Adrian had suspended the auctions, 4 days since he'd claimed her in front of the court. Apparently, that was long enough for opposition to organize. Adrian dismounted and moved to help Aria down, his hands steady on her waist even though she could feel the tension radiating from him. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, for her ears only, "stay close to me. Don't let them intimidate you. Maybe I should wait in your quarters. If this is about the auctions, it's about more than the auctions. And you're not hiding." His eyes were fierce. "You're my mate. That means you belong at my side, especially when the council tries to overstep." The word mate still sent a thrill through her, followed immediately by anxiety. The bond was so new, barely hours old. She didn't know how to be what he needed, what the position demanded. But she nodded anyway, squaring her shoulders. She'd survived the auction house. She could survive a room full of angry nobles. They walked through the palace corridors, their guards flanking them, and Aria became increasingly aware of the activity around them. Servants hurried past with worried expressions. Clusters of nobles stood in alcoves, their conversations dying as Adrian and Aria passed. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation and hostility. When they reached the throne room doors, Arya could hear the noise inside. Dozens of voices raised in argument, the scrape of boots on marble, the general chaos of too many dominant personalities in one space. Adrian paused, his hand finding hers. Ready? No. She wasn't ready. Would probably never be ready. But she squeezed his hand anyway. Yes. The doors swung open and silence crashed down like a physical weight. The throne room was packed. Not just with Adrian's council, but with what had to be representatives from every major pack in the kingdom. Alphas in ceremonial dress, their advisors clustered behind them. Betas wearing the colors of their packs. And near the front, standing in a position of clear prominence, was a man Arya had never seen before. He was tall, nearly Adrian's height, with dark red hair pulled back in a severe knot. His face was handsome in a sharp, cruel way, and his eyes, pale green, cold as winter ice, tracked Arya with open disdain. Alpha energy rolled off him in waves, not as powerful as Adrian's, but formidable nonetheless. Adrian, the man said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. How good of you to finally join us. We've been waiting for hours. Adrian's grip on Arya's hand tightened fractionally before he released it, moving forward with the easy confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. Alpha Rowan, he said, his tone carefully neutral. I wasn't aware we had scheduled a meeting. Or have the northern packs forgotten the custom of requesting an audience before arriving unannounced? Rowan's smile was sharp. We requested. Your counsel granted. Or does the Alpha King no longer trust his own advisors to make decisions in his absence? Arya saw several council members shift uncomfortably. Thorn, the elder advisor who'd protested in the previous meeting, kept his eyes fixed on the floor. They'd gone behind Adrian's back. Allowed this gathering without his knowledge or permission. My council knows their authority ends where my sovereignty begins, Adrian said softly. But since you're here, state your business. Rowan's eyes slid to Arya, still standing near the door. Our business concerns that Omega. The one you've claimed. The way he said Omega made it sound like an insult. Arya's wolf growled low in her mind. I don't like him. Neither do I, Arya agreed. Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. Arya is my mate. You'll address her with respect, or you'll leave. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Apparently, the bond had not been common knowledge before this moment. Rowan's eyebrows rose. Your mate. How convenient. Tell me, Your Majesty, did you discover this bond before or after you decided to append centuries of tradition on her behalf? The timing is irrelevant. Is it? Rowan began to pace, and Arya recognized the performance for what it was. He was playing to the crowd, building his case. You suspend the Blood Moon auctions without consulting the packs who depend on them. You claim an Omega of unknown lineage with no political value. You make sweeping decrees that affect the entire kingdom based on what? A scent? A feeling. Based on what's right, Adrian said, his voice hard. The auctions were a mercy, Rowan interrupted. For Omegas who had nowhere else to go. You've seen the reports, I'm sure. Since your suspension, dozens of Omegas have been found abandoned, cast out by packs who no longer have an option to place them elsewhere. Your idealism is creating chaos. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled alphas. Arya's chest tightened. Was that true? Had her rescue caused suffering for others? The auctions were slavery dressed as charity, Adrian countered. And any pack that would abandon an Omega rather than treat them humanely is a pack that needs to be held accountable. Accountable to whom? To you. Rowan's smile widened. You're one alpha, Adrian. Powerful, yes. King, yes. But you rule because the packs allow it. Because we choose to follow. And if your choices no longer serve the greater good. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Another voice cut in, this one belonging to a silver-haired alpha near the back. There's also the matter of the Omega herself. Her nature. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Explain. We've heard reports that she possesses unusual abilities. Magic that hasn't been seen in generations. The silver-haired alpha's gaze fixed on Arya with something between curiosity and fear. Silver light, they say. The kind the old stories warned about. How did they know? Arya had only just accessed her power hours ago, in a shrine deep in the ancient forest. Unless... Her eyes found Thorn among the council members, saw the way he refused to meet her gaze, and understanding clicked into place. The guards who'd accompanied them to the forest. They'd seen the light, seen her awakening, and they'd reported it the moment they returned. The silver light is not a threat, Adrian said firmly. You don't know that. Rowan moved closer to the throne, his posture aggressive. The old texts speak of light-bearers who went mad with power, who destroyed entire packs before they could be stopped. And you've brought one into the heart of the kingdom, claimed her as your mate, given her access to the crown's resources and protection. I've given her what she deserves. What was denied to her by ignorance and fear? Or you've been compromised. Rowan's voice dropped, became almost sympathetic. We understand, Adrian. The mate bond is powerful. It clouds judgment, makes us act irrationally. But you have a responsibility to this kingdom that supersedes personal desire. Adrian descended from the dais, moving with predatory grace until he stood mere feet from Rowan. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Choose your next words very carefully, Adrian said, his voice soft and deadly. Because they will determine whether you leave this palace as an ally or an enemy. Rowan didn't back down. The Pax want assurance that this Omega won't pose a danger. That her power can be controlled. Her power is her own. It doesn't need to be controlled. Then contained. Monitored. At least until we understand what she's capable of. No. The word echoed through the chamber with absolute finality. Rowan's expression hardened. Then the Northern Pax withdraw their support. And I suspect we won't be alone. Several alphas moved to stand with Rowan. Not all, maybe a third of those assembled. But enough to constitute a significant fracture in the kingdom's unity. Arya felt the weight of their stares, their judgment, their fear. They looked at her like she was a weapon pointed at their hearts. A threat that needed to be neutralized. And maybe they were right. She didn't know what she was capable of. Didn't know if the power inside her could be trusted. Don't, her wolf warned. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. You're not dangerous. You're powerful. There's a difference. But the distinction felt blurry as Arya watched the room divide, watched pack leaders choose sides, watched Adrian's kingdom fracture because of her. If that's your choice, Adrian said to Rowan, his voice cold, then leave. But understand that withdrawing support from the crown is an act of rebellion. And I will remember it. As will we, Rowan replied. When your Omega loses control and people die, remember that we tried to warn you. He turned to leave, the other dissenting alphas following. But before they reached the door, a sound stopped them. Low and distant. Like thunder, but wrong. Too rhythmic. Too deliberate. The windows rattled. The torches flickered. And then someone screamed. It came from outside the palace, high and terrified, cutting through the tense silence like a knife. Adrian was already moving, striding toward the windows. Arya followed, her heart pounding, and looked out over the city. Darkness was spreading from the eastern edge of the capital. Not night, this was something else. Something thick and oily, rolling through the streets like fog, but moving with purpose. Where it touched, lights went out. Buildings disappeared into shadow. And in the shadow, things moved. Arya couldn't make out clear shapes, but she saw glimpses. Red eyes. Twisted forms that looked wrong, like wolves but corrupted. The shadow beasts from the vision at the shrine. What in the moon's name is that? Someone breathed. The answer came from everywhere and nowhere, a voice that slithered into Arya's mind like ice water. The child of silver has awakened. How thoughtful of her to announce herself so clearly. Now we know exactly where to find her. Arya gasped, staggering back from the window. The voice wasn't in the room. It was in her head, cold and ancient and filled with malice. Adrian caught her, his hands steadying. What is it? What's wrong? The voice, she managed. It spoke to me. The darkness, it's here for me. Horror washed through her. The shrine's prophecy, The warning about an old enemy waking, it was happening now. And it was happening because she'd claimed her power, because she'd let the light free. This was her fault. The shadow continued to spread, swallowing more of the city. Screams multiplied. And in the throne room, chaos erupted. The city is under attack. We need to evacuate. Those things in the shadow, they're killing people. Adrian's voice cut through the panic like a whip crack. All able fighters to the walls. Protect the civilians, get them to shelter. Counselors, activate the emergency protocols. Move. The room emptied in a rush of bodies, alphas and guards streaming toward the exits. Rowan paused in the doorway, his expression grim. This is what happens when you meddle with old magic, he said to Adrian. I hope your mate is worth the lives this will cost. Then he was gone, running to join the defense. Arya stood frozen, watching through the window as shadow consumed her new home. People were dying. Because of her. Because she'd been selfish enough to want her power back, to think she deserved to be whole. No, her wolf snarled. This isn't our fault. That thing has been waiting, planning. We just gave it a target. But a target was still a target. And the people suffering below had done nothing to deserve being caught in the crossfire of ancient conflicts. I have to go, Adrian said, his voice tight with urgency. I have to lead the defense. I know. He turned to her, conflict written across his face. Stay here. Stay in the palace where the wards are strongest. Promise me. Arya looked at him, her mate, her protector, the Alpha King who'd given her everything when she'd had nothing. She saw the fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for her. And she made a decision. I can't promise that. Arya. That thing is here for me. It said so. Which means keeping me locked away won't stop it. It'll tear through the city, kill innocent people, just to get to me. You don't know how to fight. Your power is barely awakened. Then I'll learn fast. She grabbed his hands, forcing him to look at her. I won't hide while people die because of me. I can't. That's not who I am. It's not your responsibility to. Yes, it is. Her voice was firm, certain. The shrine said I was chosen for this. That I'm supposed to stand against the darkness. Maybe this is why. Maybe everything that happened, the auction, finding you, awakening the light, maybe it was all leading to this moment. Adrian's jaw clenched. I can't lose you. Not when I've just found you. You won't. Arya pulled him down, pressing her forehead to his. We're mates. That means we fight together. Not you protecting me from the shadows while the world burns. For a long moment, Adrian was silent. Then he exhaled roughly and pulled her into a fierce embrace. Stay close to me then, he murmured into her hair. And if things go wrong, they won't. If they do, run. Promise me that at least. If it comes down to you or the city, you run and you don't look back. Arya couldn't promise that. Wouldn't promise that. So she said nothing, just held him tighter, memorizing the feel of his arms around her, his scent, his warmth. Because she had a terrible feeling that before this night was over, everything would change. They broke apart, and Adrian's eyes had shifted, no longer fully human, the wolf rising to the surface. Let's go save our city. The battle was already raging when they reached the eastern walls. Arya had never seen anything like it. The shadow had formed a perimeter around a section of the city, a dark barrier that nothing could penetrate from outside. Inside that barrier, those corrupted shadow beasts hunted. They moved like wolves, but wrong, too many joints, limbs that bent at impossible angles, mouths full of too many teeth. And wherever they touched someone, darkness spread like infection, draining color and life until only husks remained. Adrian had shifted partially, claws and fangs extending, his eyes fully wolf now. Around them, other defenders fought in various states of transformation, trying to hold the line, trying to protect civilians fleeing toward the palace. We need to breach the barrier, Adrian shouted over the chaos. Get inside and eliminate the source. What source? Arya yelled back. There. He pointed toward the heart of the shadowed area, where the darkness seemed thickest. Something is anchoring it. Kill the anchor, break the barrier. A shadow beast lunged at them from the side. Adrian met it mid-leap, his claws tearing through corrupted flesh. The thing shrieked and dissolved into oily smoke. More were coming. 12. 2. Arya felt her power surge in response to the threat, silver light gathering beneath her skin. She didn't know how to fight, didn't know how to direct the energy. But her wolf did. Trust me, her wolf said. Let me guide you. Arya stopped thinking and just moved. Raised her hands as a beast lunged. Silver light exploded from her palms, hitting the creature square in the chest. Unlike Adrian's claws, which destroyed the beasts, her light seemed to purify them. The corruption burned away, and for just a second, Arya saw what the creature had been, a normal wolf, twisted and enslaved by darkness. Then it was gone, freed from whatever had controlled it. You're not killing them, Adrian observed, slashing through another beast. You're saving them. Arya blasted another creature with silver light, watched the corruption burn away. They were innocent once. The darkness just took them. Can you do that on a larger scale? I don't know. I've never tried. Try now. Arya closed her eyes, reaching for the well of power inside her. It responded immediately, eager, vast. She pulled more of it to the surface, letting it build until her entire body glowed with silver radiance. Then she released it. Light exploded outward in a wave, washing over the shadow beasts like a tide. Dozens of them shrieked as the corruption burned away, their true forms revealed for just a moment before they disappeared. The shadow barrier flickered, weakened by the purge of its soldiers. Again, Adrian urged. You're breaking its hold. But Arya was already exhausted, the power drain severe. She'd used more in that one blast than she'd even known she possessed. Her legs trembled, her vision swimming. Adrian caught her as she swayed. Easy. Don't push too hard. I'm fine. Just need a second to. The malevolent voice from before slithered back into her mind, amused and cruel. Impressive, little light-bearer. But you're so new to your power. So untrained. Let me show you what true strength looks like. The shadow barrier contracted suddenly, pulling in on itself. The darkness concentrated, solidified, and from its heart, something emerged. It stood twice as tall as any wolf, its body a writhing mass of shadow and malice. Red eyes burned in what might have been a face, and when it opened its mouth, Arya saw an abyss. By the moon, someone whispered. The creature's gaze fixed on Arya, and when it spoke, its voice resonated in her bones. Come to me, child of silver. Face me alone, and I'll let your city live. Hide behind your alpha, and I'll reduce it all to ash. Don't, Adrian growled. Don't even think about it. But Arya was thinking about it. Thinking about the people huddling in their homes terrified. About the wolves who'd already died fighting this thing's minions. About the price of her power, her awakening. The creature wanted her. Only her. If she could draw it away from the city, give Adrian time to evacuate everyone. Sister, no, her wolf pleaded. We can't face that thing alone. We're not ready. Maybe not. Probably not. But what choice did she have? Arya pulled away from Adrian's supporting arm, standing on her own despite the exhaustion weighing her down. I'm going, she said quietly. Arya. It wants me, Adrian. Not the city. Not you. Me. And I won't let everyone else pay for what I am. I won't let you face that thing alone. She turned to him, and for the first time since they'd met, she let him see all of her. Not the frightened Omega or the uncertain girl, or the woman still learning to trust. She let him see the silver light burning in her core, the determination that had carried her through years of rejection, the strength she was only beginning to understand she possessed. Then trust me to know my own power, she said. Trust that maybe the moon chose me for this for a reason. Adrian's expression was anguished, torn between duty and devotion. If you don't come back, I will. Arya pressed a quick, fierce kiss to his lips. I have a mate to come back to. That's not something I'm willing to lose. Then, before he could stop her, before she could second-guess herself, Arya ran toward the shadow creature. Silver light blazed around her like armor, like wings, like the promise of a dawn that refused to be extinguished. Behind her, she heard Adrian roar, rage and fear and pride all tangled together. Ahead of her, the darkness waited. And Arya ran straight into its heart. The darkness swallowed Arya whole. One moment she was running across cobblestones, silver light blazing from her skin, the sounds of battle raging behind her. The next, the shadow barrier closed around her like a fist, and the world disappeared into absolute blackness. She couldn't see, couldn't hear anything except her own ragged breathing and the thundering of her heart. The silver light that had been pouring from her hands sputtered, dimmed, as if the darkness itself was actively smothering it. "Don't let it," her wolf snarled. "Fight back. The light is ours. It doesn't get to take it." Arya reached deeper, pulled harder on the well of power inside her chest. The light flared brighter, pushing back the shadow just enough for her to see a few feet in any direction. She was standing in what looked like the ruins of the city's square, except everything was wrong. The buildings were twisted, melting like wax. The ground beneath her feet felt soft, unstable, as if it might give way at any moment. And the air. It was thick, heavy, tasting of rot and copper. "Brave little light bearer." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Arya spun, trying to locate its source, but saw only shifting shadows. Or perhaps just foolish, the voice continued, amused. "Running toward death with such determination. Do you think your light can stop me? Me, who existed before the moon blessed the first wolf? Who watched civilizations rise and fall while your kind were still learning to stand upright? What are you?" Arya demanded, forcing her voice to stay steady. Laughter echoed through the darkness, cold and mirthless. "I am what your people tried to forget. The price of the moon's gifts. The shadow cast by her light. For every blessing she gave, balance demanded a curse. And I am that curse, given form and hunger." The shadows coalesced in front of her, taking shape. The creature from before, massive and terrible, but clearer now. Arya could see that beneath the writhing darkness, there was a structure, bones that looked almost wolf-like but elongated, wrong. A skeleton wrapped in malevolence. "You were a wolf once," Arya realized. "I was many wolves. All the ones who rejected the moon's gifts, who saw transformation as curse rather than blessing. Their rage, their hatred, their refusal, it accumulated over centuries, festered in the dark places, until it became me. Became us." The creature's red eyes burned brighter. "And we have been waiting so long for one of the light bearers to emerge. So long to have our revenge on the moon's favored children." It lunged without warning. Arya threw up her hands instinctively, silver light exploding outward in a defensive wave. The creature hit the barrier of light and recoiled, shrieking, smoke rising from where the radiance touched it. But it didn't retreat. Instead, it circled, testing her defenses, looking for weakness. "You're untrained," it observed. "Raw power with no control. No finesse. The moment your strength fails, I will tear you apart and feast on your light until nothing remains." Arya's arms trembled from holding the barrier. The creature was right, she had no idea what she was doing. She was running on instinct and desperation, and both were finite resources. "We need help," her wolf said urgently. "We can't do this alone." But asking for help meant leading this thing back toward Adrian, back toward the defenders. Meant putting everyone at risk. "I won't let you have the city," Arya said through gritted teeth. "Then you'll die here. Alone. While your mate listens to you scream." The creature attacked again, this time from multiple angles at once. Shadow tendrils whipped toward her from all sides. Arya's barrier held against the first wave, but cracks appeared in the light. The second wave broke through. Pain exploded across her shoulder as a tendril caught her, its touch like ice and acid combined. Arya screamed, the barrier collapsing entirely as her concentration shattered. She stumbled backward, clutching her shoulder. Where the shadow had touched, her skin was blackened, corruption spreading like frost across glass. "No, no, no," her wolf whimpered. "Sister, get up. We have to move." Arya tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The corruption was spreading fast, numbing her arm, creeping toward her chest, toward her heart. This was it. She'd failed. made it less than 5 minutes against an enemy that had existed for centuries. Some chosen one she'd turned out to be. The creature loomed over her, savoring its victory. Did you really think you could stand against me? You, who only just learned to touch your power. The light bearers of old trained for decades, and even they couldn't destroy me. Only imprison me. And now there's no one left who remembers how. It raised what might have been a clawed hand, darkness gathering around it, preparing to strike the killing blow. Arya closed her eyes, too exhausted and too poisoned to run. She thought of Adrian. Hoped he would forgive her for being too weak, too inexperienced, too broken to be what he needed. The killing blow never came. Instead, a roar split the darkness, primal and furious and achingly familiar. Arya's eyes flew open just in time to see a massive black wolf crash into the shadow creature, jaws closing around what passed for its throat. Silver light blazed from the wolf's fur, not the cool silver of Arya's power, but something else. Something that came from the bond between them. Adrian. He'd shifted fully, and somehow he'd found her in the darkness. Of course he did, her wolf said, relief flooding through their connection. He's our mate. He'll always find us. Adrian's jaws tore through shadow, his claws raked across the creature's form. Everywhere he touched, the corruption burned away, unable to withstand the combined force of alpha dominance and mate bond fury. The creature shrieked, thrashing, trying to throw him off. Its tendrils whipped around Adrian's body, seeking purchase, trying to infect him the way they'd infected Arya. But the light blazing from him was too bright. The shadows couldn't hold. With a final, wrenching twist, Adrian ripped the creature's head from its body. The shadow thing collapsed, dissolving into smoke and screaming voices that echoed and faded into nothing. The darkness around them fractured, breaking apart like shattered glass. Light flooded back in real light, moonlight and torches from the city that was suddenly visible again. They were still in the square, but it was normal now. Undamaged. The twisted reality the creature had created was gone. Adrian shifted back to human form, immediately dropping to his knees beside Arya. He was breathing hard, blood streaking his chest from wounds she hadn't seen him take. But his attention was entirely on her, on the corruption still spreading across her shoulder. No, he breathed, his hands hovering over the blackened skin, afraid to touch and cause more pain. No, Arya, stay with me. I'm sorry, she whispered. Her lips felt numb. Everything felt distant, like she was drifting away from her own body. I thought I could. I thought. Don't apologize. Adrian's voice broke. You were so brave. So incredibly brave. But I need you to fight now. Fight this corruption. Your light can burn it away, I know it can. Too tired. Can't reach it. Then I'll help you. He pressed his hand over her heart, and Arya felt warmth flood through her. Not her power, his. Alpha energy, raw and strong, flowing into her through the mate bond. Use it, Adrian's voice echoed in her mind, the bond allowing them to communicate without words. Take my strength. It's yours. Everything I am is yours. Arya latched onto that warmth like a lifeline. Used it to push past her exhaustion, past the numbness, down to where her silver light still flickered weakly. She grabbed hold of it and pulled. Light blazed from her chest, spreading outward, meeting the corruption head-on. The two forces clashed inside her body, fire and ice, creation and destruction. For a terrible moment, Arya wasn't sure which would win. Then Adrian's hand pressed harder against her heart, more of his energy pouring in, and the balance tipped. The silver light surged, burning away the corruption inch by inch, reclaiming her body from the darkness. Arya cried out. Not in pain, but in relief as feeling returned to her arm, as the numbness retreated, as life flooded back into spaces that had been dying. Finally, the last traces of shadow burned away, and Arya collapsed against Adrian, gasping for air. He caught her, cradled her against his chest, his arms wrapped around her like he could physically hold her together through will alone. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you. You're safe. Around them, the sounds of battle had ceased. Other defenders were appearing, checking the area, searching for remaining threats. Arya heard someone shouting orders, heard the organized chaos of soldiers securing a battlefield. But it all felt distant. All that mattered was Adrian's arms around her, his heartbeat under her ear, the warmth of him chasing away the lingering cold. "Is it dead?" she managed to ask. "Its form is destroyed. Whether that's permanent." Adrian's arms tightened. "I don't know. But it's gone for now." "The city?" "Intact. You drew it away before it could do real damage. Saved hundreds of lives." Arya wanted to feel proud of that. Instead, she just felt hollowed out and shaking. "I wasn't strong enough," she whispered. "It would have killed me if you hadn't. But I did. That's what mates do. We protect each other." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his eyes fierce. "And you were strong enough. You faced that thing alone, kept it contained, gave us time to evacuate civilians." "That's not weakness, Arya. That's heroism." Heroism felt like too grand a word for someone who'd barely survived and needed rescuing. But arguing took energy she didn't have, so she just nodded and let him pull her close again. One of the guards approached, bowing respectfully. "Your Majesty, we've secured the perimeter. No more shadow creatures detected. But you're both injured. The healers are waiting." Adrian nodded curtly. "Good. Have them prepare rooms in the East Wing." "Private, well-guarded." "Not the throne room wing?" the guard asked, confused. "No. Somewhere quieter. Less formal." Adrian's tone made it clear the discussion was over. The guard bowed and retreated. Adrian stood carefully, lifting Arya with him. She should have protested, insisted she could walk. But her legs still felt unsteady, and being carried meant she could rest her head against his shoulder and close her eyes for just a moment. Just a moment turned into longer as Adrian navigated through the palace. Arya drifted in a haze of exhaustion, aware of movement and voices, but not really processing them. She felt Adrian's arms adjust their grip, heard him speaking in low tones to someone, Marin, the healer, felt herself being laid down on something soft. Then gentle hands were examining her shoulder, applying salves that stung and soothed in equal measure. She heard Adrian's voice, tight with controlled anger, demanding to know if the corruption had caused permanent damage. "No, Your Majesty," Marin's calm voice responded. Her light burned it out. "She'll heal completely. Just needs rest and time." Time. Arya could do time. Time meant closing her eyes and drifting away from the pain and fear and overwhelming wrongness of the night. When she woke, the room was dim and quiet. Not Adrian's quarters, somewhere smaller, cozier. A fire crackled in a modest hearth, casting dancing shadows across stone walls. The bed she lay in was comfortable, but not the massive affair from the king's chambers. Through a window, she could see stars glittering in a clear sky. The storm had passed, both the literal one and the magical darkness. Movement near the fire caught her attention. Adrian sat in a chair pulled close to the hearth, staring into the flames. He'd cleaned up. No more blood, wearing simple clothes, his hair damp as if from a recent bath. But even in profile, Arya could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "You're awake," he said without turning. "I can hear your heartbeat change." Arya pushed herself up to sitting, wincing as her shoulder protested. The skin there was bandaged, but the deep ache of corruption was gone, replaced with the more normal pain of healing flesh. "How long was I out?" "Few hours." "The sun will rise soon." Adrian finally looked at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "You scared me tonight." "I scared myself." "Good. Maybe next time you'll think twice before running straight at a manifestation of ancient evil." Despite everything, Arya found herself smiling slightly. "Probably not." Adrian's expression cracked, something between exasperation and affection. "No, probably not." Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with unspoken things. Arya pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Where are we?" "Old quarters in the East Wing. Where I used to stay before I became king, when I was just me." He gestured vaguely at the modest room. "Thought you might prefer somewhere less formal after tonight. Somewhere you could just rest without feeling like you're on display." The consideration in that simple choice made Arya's throat tighten. He'd thought about what she needed, what would make her comfortable, even in the aftermath of battle when he had 1,000 other things demanding his attention. "Thank you," she said softly. Adrian rose from the chair and crossed to the bed, sitting on the edge but maintaining a careful distance. "I'm the one who should be thanking you. You drew that thing away from the city, kept it contained." Marin said if it had reached the populated areas in full force, the casualties would have been catastrophic. "But I couldn't beat it. You had to save me. And you burned the corruption out of your own body, using my strength as a catalyst. We saved each other, Arya. That's how this works." She looked at him, really looked. At the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights even before tonight. At the new scar on his forearm that hadn't been there this morning. At the weight of responsibility he carried so quietly that it was easy to forget he was only 28, barely older than her. "When did you become king?" she asked suddenly. Adrian blinked, surprised by the change in topic. 5 years ago. When my father died. That's young for an alpha king." "It is." He looked back at the fire, his expression distant. "I wasn't ready. Wasn't supposed to take the throne for another decade at least. But my father had a weak heart. Kept it hidden from everyone except the healers. One day it just stopped. And suddenly I was standing in the throne room wearing a crown I didn't know how to carry." Arya heard the pain beneath the matter-of-fact words. "You didn't have anyone to guide you?" "My mother died when I was young. My father's advisors were," he paused, choosing words carefully, "more interested in maintaining their own power than helping a grieving son learn to rule. I made mistakes. So many mistakes those first few years. Trusted the wrong people. Made decisions I regret." "Like what?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he said, like not shutting down the auctions immediately. "I knew they were wrong. Felt it in my bones. But the council convinced me that tradition mattered, that I couldn't alienate the noble houses, that I needed to be patient and work within the system." His hands clenched into fists on his knees. "So I was patient. And while I was being patient and political, Omegas suffered." "You suffered." "Because I wasn't brave enough to do what was right instead of what was easy." Arya reached out without thinking, covering one of his fists with her hand. "You did it eventually. When it mattered. Only because you gave me the catalyst I needed. The excuse." He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. "Meeting you, it reminded me why I took this crown in the first place. Not to maintain tradition or placate nobles, but to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. To make the kingdom into something better than what I inherited." The raw honesty in his voice made Arya's heart ache. Here was the Alpha King, admitting doubt and regret and fear. Showing her the man beneath the crown. She squeezed his hand. "I don't know how to be what you need." "What I need?" "A mate. A partner. Someone who stands at your side and knows how to navigate court politics and doesn't run straight at shadow creatures without a plan." The words tumbled out faster. "I'm just an Omega who's been rejected and isolated and broken down so many times I don't remember what whole feels like. I don't know how to be in a palace, how to talk to nobles, how to be anything other than small and quiet and invisible." "I don't want you small and quiet and invisible." "Then what do you want?" Adrian shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Arya's breath caught at the tenderness in the gesture. "I want you exactly as you are," he said, his voice low and intense. "Brave and scared and fierce and fragile all at once. I want the girl who clung to my throne because she refused to give up. I want the woman who faced an ancient evil to protect a city that hasn't even accepted her yet. I want my mate, in all her complexity and contradiction and perfectly imperfect humanity." Arya's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I don't know if that's enough." "It's everything." Adrian's forehead pressed against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "I see you, Arya. All of you. The power and the fear, the strength and the wounds, the light and the shadows. And I'm not going anywhere." The words cracked something open in Arya's chest. Some last wall she'd been holding onto, some final defense against hope. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this." Of you. Of believing that this is real and then losing it. Her voice broke. Everyone I've ever trusted has left or pushed me away. What if you? I won't. Adrian's certainty was absolute. The mate bond isn't something I take lightly, Arya. It's not a choice I made or a decision I can unmake. You're written into my soul now. Leaving you would be like cutting out my own heart. But what if I'm not strong enough? What if next time? Then we'll face it together. And we'll keep facing it, keep fighting until either we win or the world ends. But we do it together. Arya searched his eyes, looking for doubt or reservation or any sign that he was just saying what she needed to hear. All she found was unwavering resolve and something deeper. Something that looked a lot like love, even though it was too soon, too fast, too impossible. But maybe impossible was what they'd been made for. She closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question more than a demand. Adrian froze for a heartbeat, as if afraid to presume, to push too far too fast. Then Arya's hand slid into his hair, pulling him closer, and he answered the question. His mouth moved against hers with a tenderness that contradicted his strength, one hand still cradling her face while the other found her waist. He kissed her like she was precious, like she might break, like he had all the time in the world and wanted to spend it memorizing the taste of her lips. Arya melted into it, into him, feeling safe for the first time since, maybe ever. The bond between them sang, two halves of a whole finally coming together, and power flickered at the edges of the connection. Silver light and golden alpha energy, twining together like they'd been designed to fit. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since the throne room, he admitted roughly. What stopped you? Didn't want you to think I expected anything. That my protection came with strings attached. Arya smiled against his lips. And now? Now I know you kiss me because you want to. Not because you think you owe me. His thumb traced her lower lip, his eyes darkening. Though I should probably stop before I forget you're still healing. I'm fine. You were corrupted by shadow magic a few hours ago. And you burned it out. I'm fine. Arya kissed him again, shorter this time but no less intense. Stay with me? Just stay. Something in Adrian's expression softened. Where else would I be? He stretched out on the bed beside her, careful not to jostle her injured shoulder, and pulled her against his chest. Arya settled into the curve of his body, her head tucked beneath his chin, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong. Tell me something, she murmured. Something you've never told anyone else. Adrian was quiet, his hand drawing idle patterns on her back. Then, so softly she almost didn't hear it. Sometimes I wonder if my father knew he was dying. If he chose not to tell me because he didn't think I was ready. Didn't think I'd ever be ready. His voice held old pain. And I wonder if he was right. He wasn't, Arya said with certainty. You're a good king, Adrian. The fact that you question yourself proves it. Bad rulers never doubt their choices. His arms tightened around her. And you? What's something you've never told anyone? Arya thought about all the secrets she'd carried, all the hurts she'd hidden. Then settled on the truest one. I stopped believing I deserved to be happy, she admitted. Somewhere along the way, I accepted that survival was all I'd ever get. That wanting more was selfish and foolish and would only lead to more pain. And now? She tilted her head up to look at him, at the way the firelight caught in his eyes. Now I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I can have more than just survival. Adrian's smile was soft and real. You can have everything, Arya. Everything you want. I'll make sure of it. It was a reckless promise. An impossible one. But lying in his arms, the bond humming between them, Arya let herself believe it. Just for tonight, she let herself believe in impossible things. Outside, the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day. A new beginning. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Arya wasn't afraid of what it might bring. Because whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The days following the shadow attack should have brought unity. They didn't. Instead, Arya watched from the edges of council meetings as the kingdom fractured further. The alphas who'd stood with Rowan used the attack as proof that her power was dangerous, unpredictable, a beacon for darkness that would only bring more destruction. Those who defended Adrian argued that she'd saved the city, that without her light the casualties would have been catastrophic. Neither side was entirely wrong. And that was the problem. Arya kept to the East Wing quarters mostly, venturing out only when Adrian asked her to accompany him. She attended formal dinners where nobles whispered behind their hands, sat through council sessions where advisors debated her existence like she wasn't in the room, endured the stares and speculation and thinly veiled hostility. Lyanna remained a constant presence, her cheerful determination a balm against the isolation. And Adrian was her anchor. Every morning he brought her breakfast. Every evening they ate together, talking about everything and nothing. Every night he held her while she slept, his presence chasing away nightmares of shadow and corruption. The bond between them deepened with each passing day. Arya could feel him now even when they were apart, a golden warmth at the back of her mind that pulsed with emotion. She knew when council meetings frustrated him, when political maneuvering exhausted him, when he worried about her despite his careful control. And he could feel her too. The anxiety that never quite faded. The power that grew stronger as she practiced, sometimes too strong, spiraling out of control until Adrian's steady presence helped her rein it back in. They were learning each other. Learning the bond. Learning how to be mates in the midst of a kingdom that seemed determined to tear them apart. 2 weeks after the shadow attack, everything changed. Arya woke that morning to find Adrian already gone, a note left on his pillow in his precise handwriting. Emergency council session. Delegation from the northern packs arrived last night. I'll send for you once I know what they want. K. The northern packs. Rowan's territory. Arya's stomach knotted with unease as she dressed. Lyanna appeared with breakfast, but seemed subdued, her usual chatter replaced with worried silence. What is it? Arya asked. What aren't you telling me? Lyanna bit her lip. There are rumors. About the delegation. They brought someone with them. A witness, they're calling her. Witness to what? I don't know. But Miss Arya, Lyanna's eyes were troubled. Whatever happens today, remember that His Majesty believes in you. No matter what anyone says. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a warning. Arya had just finished eating when a knock sounded at the door. Not Lyanna's gentle tap or Adrian's firm knock. This was perfunctory official. A palace guard stood in the hallway, his expression neutral. The Alpha King requests your presence in the throne room immediately. Not the council chambers. The throne room. Where formal audiences were held. Where pronouncements were made. Where judgments were passed. Arya's hands trembled as she smoothed her dress, a deep green gown Lyanna had insisted she wear, formal enough for court but not ostentatious. She looked like she belonged in a palace now. Felt like an imposter regardless. The walk to the throne room felt endless. Guards lined the corridors, more than usual. Nobles clustered in alcoves, their conversations dying as she passed. The air itself felt charged, electric with anticipation. Whatever was happening, the entire palace knew about it. The throne room door stood open, and the moment Arya crossed the threshold, she understood why Adrian had sent for her. The room was packed. Not just with the usual council members and court nobles, but with what had to be representatives from every major pack in the kingdom. Alphas and their advisors, betas wearing their pack colors, even a few omegas standing in positions of clear authority within their delegations. And at the front, standing in a position of prominence before the throne, was Rowan. Beside him stood a woman Arya had never seen before. Middle-aged, severe-looking, wearing the dark robes of a pack elder. Her eyes were cold and calculating as they fixed on Arya. Adrian sat on his throne, his expression carved from stone. But through the bond, Arya felt his turmoil, anger and frustration, and something that felt like dread. All eyes turned to Arya as she walked down the center aisle. The whispers started immediately. She heard fragments. That's her. Doesn't look so dangerous. The silver light. Arya kept her chin up, her shoulders back, and walked to where Adrian had indicated with a subtle gesture, a place to his right, below the dais, but clearly positioned as important as his. "Now that we're all assembled," Rowan said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, "we can begin." "Begin what, exactly?" Adrian's tone was dangerously soft. "You arrive unannounced, demand an audience, and provide no explanation beyond vague claims of urgent business." "Urgent business indeed, Your Majesty." Rowan gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Elder Thea, from the Northern Territories. She's come forward with information about your mate. Information that concerns the safety of the entire kingdom." Arya's heart kicked against her ribs. She forced herself to remain still, to show no reaction. "What information?" Adrian demanded. Elder Thea stepped forward, her gaze never leaving Arya. When she spoke, her voice was sharp and clear. "I knew this girl's mother. Knew her family. Knew what they were." She paused for effect. "The bloodline that carries the silver light is not blessed, Your Majesty. It's cursed. Has been for generations." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Arya felt her stomach drop. "Explain," Adrian said, his voice hard. "The first bearer of the silver light, the one the old stories romanticize, she didn't receive the moon's blessing. She stole it." Thea's words fell like hammer blows. "Broke into the sacred places, took power that was never meant for mortal wolves, and in doing so, she cursed her entire line. Every generation since has produced one child with the light. And every generation, that child has brought destruction." "That's not true," Arya found herself saying. "The shrine showed me." "The shrine shows what people want to see," Thea interrupted. "It reflects desire back as truth. But I have records. Documentation spanning 200 years. Every silver light bearer and the catastrophes that followed them." She pulled a scroll from her robes and handed it to one of Adrian's guards, who brought it to the throne. Adrian unrolled it, his eyes scanning the contents, and Arya watched his expression shift. Not to disbelief. To uncertainty. No, he couldn't be doubting her. Not after everything. "This scroll," Thea continued, addressing the room now rather than just Adrian, documents 17 silver light bearers over the past 2 centuries. 13 of them lost control of their power and killed everyone around them. 3 were executed before they could. 1, this girl's great-great-grandmother, was imprisoned for life after she leveled an entire village in a fit of rage. The room erupted in shocked whispers and exclamations. Arya wanted to deny it, to call Thea a liar, but her voice seemed locked in her throat. "The bloodline was supposed to end," Thea said, her eyes boring into Arya. "Your mother knew this. Knew the danger. That's why she never told you the truth about what you are. She hoped the power would skip you, that you'd be born normal, and the curse would finally die out." "My mother loved me," Arya whispered. "Your mother feared you. Just as your pack feared you. Just as everyone who truly knows what the silver light means fears you." Thea's voice softened, became almost pitying. "You're not chosen, child. You're damned. And everyone who gets close to you will suffer for it." Adrian stood abruptly. "This is speculation based on old records. It proves nothing about Arya. Doesn't it?" Rowan stepped forward. "The shadow creature appeared days after she awakened her power. It said as much, that she announced herself, made herself a target. How many more will come? How much destruction will follow her before you accept what she is?" "She saved the city," Adrian shot back. "Her power destroyed that creature." "Did it?" Thea's expression was grave. "Your Majesty, the shadow wasn't destroyed. It was scattered. Pushed back temporarily. And it will return, stronger, drawn by her light like a moth to flame. Every time she uses her power, she makes the beacon brighter. Makes the target larger." Through the bond, Arya felt Adrian's certainty waver. Felt doubt creep in. It felt like a knife between her ribs. "There's more," Rowan said. "Reports from the countryside. 3 villages attacked by shadow creatures in the past week. All of them in areas that border the capital. All moving closer. That's not Arya's fault. Isn't it?" Rowan's voice rose. "These attacks didn't start until she awakened. The pattern is clear, Your Majesty, even if you don't want to see it. Another council member spoke up, one of the moderates who'd remained neutral until now. Perhaps Elder Thea's counsel should be considered. If there's even a chance the power is unstable, that it draws darkness rather than repels it. Then what? Adrian's voice cracked like a whip. What are you suggesting? Silence fell. Heavy and suffocating. Finally, Thea spoke. The same solution every generation has faced. The power must be bound again. Locked away where it can't be used. Where it can't call to the darkness. No. Adrian's response was immediate. I won't allow her to be caged. Then send her away, another voice called from the crowd. Exile her to the far territories where if darkness comes, it won't devastate the heart of the kingdom. More voices joined in, building on each other. Bind her power. Send her north. She's too dangerous. The curse must be broken. Arya stood frozen as the room debated her fate like she was an object to be disposed of rather than a person. Every word was a cut, every suggestion a blow. These people didn't know her, didn't care who she was beyond the power she carried. She'd been through this before. In her old pack. The same fear, the same rejection, the same determination to make her into something small and controllable. Or to make her disappear entirely. Through the bond, she felt Adrian's rage building. Felt him preparing to shut down the discussion, to assert his authority, to protect her the way he always did. But she also felt his doubt. Small but present, like a splinter working its way deeper. What if they were right? What if her power did draw darkness? What if loving her, protecting her, keeping her close meant condemning the kingdom to endless attacks? Arya looked at Adrian and saw the conflict written across his face. Duty versus devotion. King versus mate. And she realized with crushing clarity that she couldn't let him make that choice. Couldn't let him sacrifice his kingdom for her. Couldn't be the reason he failed the people he'd sworn to protect. Enough. Her voice cut through the chaos, quiet but carrying a power that made everyone fall silent. Silver light flickered beneath her skin, responding to her emotional turmoil. You want me gone? Arya said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. You want the threat removed? Fine. I'll leave. Arya, no, Adrian started down from the dais. You can't protect me from this, she said, looking at him, memorizing his face. Not when they're right. They're not right. They're afraid. And maybe they should be. Arya's hands clenched at her sides. I don't know how to control this power. Don't know if it draws darkness or repels it. Don't know if I'm blessed or cursed. But I know I won't let you destroy your kingdom for me. This is my kingdom, Adrian said fiercely. And I decide what threatens it. Not them. Not fear. Me. Then decide wisely. Arya's voice broke. Decide as a king, not as my mate. She saw the words hit him like physical blows. Saw the anguish in his eyes, the impossible position she was forcing him into. But she couldn't stop. Because if she didn't do this now, didn't make the choice herself, he would tear himself apart trying to choose between her and his duty. The girl shows wisdom, Thea said approvingly. Perhaps the curse can end with her after all. A binding ceremony, performed correctly this time, permanent and unbreakable. No. Arya turned to face the elder. No more bindings. No more cages. If I leave whole. I leave free. And allow you to wander the kingdom unchecked, a beacon for every shadow creature that crawls from the darkness? Rowan stepped forward. That's not acceptable. Then what is? Arya demanded, anger beginning to burn through the grief. What will make you feel safe? What will satisfy your fear? Exile beyond the kingdom's borders, Rowan said flatly. Far enough that when the darkness comes for you, it doesn't drag us all down with it. The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Arya waited for Adrian to refuse. To assert his authority. To tell them all that she wasn't going anywhere. But he stood silent, conflict written across every line of his body, and that silence was answer enough. He was considering it. Actually considering sending her away. The betrayal cut deeper than any shadow corruption could have. Your Majesty. Thea's voice was almost gentle. I know the mate bond makes this difficult. But you're king first. Your duty is to the kingdom, to the thousands of lives that depend on your protection." Still Adrian said nothing. Arya felt something inside her crack. Some last fragile hope that she'd been more than a political problem to solve. "Fine," she said, her voice hollow. "I'll go. But I need time to prepare, to gather supplies for the journey." "You'll have until sunrise tomorrow," Rowan said before Adrian could respond. "And you'll be escorted to ensure you actually leave the kingdom rather than hiding in the countryside." Arya nodded numbly. Then, without looking at Adrian, because she knew if she looked at him, if she saw whatever expression was on his face, she would shatter completely, she turned and walked out of the throne room. The crowd parted for her like she was diseased. Like proximity alone might infect them with her curse. She made it to the corridor before the first sob broke free. Made it to the east wing before her legs gave out and she collapsed against a wall, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The bond between her and Adrian was still there, still present, but it felt strained. Stretched thin by distance and doubt, and the terrible weight of the choice neither of them had wanted to make. "Sister," her wolf whimpered. "He'll come. He'll fix this. He has to." But the minutes stretched into an hour and Adrian didn't come. Eventually, Lyanna found her. The girl said nothing, just helped Arya to her feet and guided her back to the quarters. Helped her pack the few belongings she'd accumulated: clothes, a few books Adrian had given her, the small tokens that had made the palace feel like home. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Arya stood at the window and looked out over the city she'd saved. The city that was now demanding her exile. A knock at the door made her heart leap. Adrian. Finally. But when she opened the door, it wasn't Adrian standing there. It was Maren, the healer, her expression troubled. "I'm sorry to disturb you," Maren said quietly. "But there's something you need to know. Before you leave. Something about Elder Thea's claims." Arya stepped back, allowing her in. "What about them?" Maren pulled out a scroll. Different from the one Thea had shown the council, older and more worn. "I've been the palace healer for 30 years. Before that, I studied in the Northern Territories under the previous head healer. While I was there, I had access to their archives, including records about the Silver Light Bearers." She unrolled the scroll and Arya saw names, dates, detailed accounts. Elder Thea didn't lie about there being 17 bearers, Maren said. But she lied about what happened to them. Yes, some lost control. But not because the power was cursed. Because they were hunted, persecuted, driven mad by isolation and fear until their power became the weapon everyone feared it would be. Arya's breath caught. "You're saying..." "I'm saying the curse is self-fulfilling. People fear the light bearers, so they treat them as threats, which causes the bearers to become threats in self-defense. It's not the power that's cursed. It's the response to it." "And the shadow creatures? The attacks? Those started before you awakened. Small incidents, easily dismissed as natural predators or rogue wolves. But they've been building for months." Maren's eyes were intense. "You didn't summon the darkness, child. You're the response to it. The light rising to meet the shadow." Hope flared in Arya's chest, painful and desperate. "Did you tell the council this?" "Tell Adrian." "I tried. But Elder Thea has influence and Rowan has the backing of the northern packs. They didn't want to hear an alternate interpretation." Maren gripped Arya's hands. "But you should know the truth. Should know that you're not cursed. That the power inside you is exactly what it was always meant to be, a defense against the darkness." Arya looked at the scroll, at the documented evidence that could change everything. Then she heard footsteps in the corridor. Heavy boots. Multiple sets. The guards, come to ensure she didn't run before the escort arrived in the morning. Maren quickly rolled up the scroll and pressed it into Arya's hands. "Take this. Study it. And remember, you are not what they say you are. You're so much more." She slipped out just as the guards reached the door. Arya hid the scroll among her belongings and waited. Waited for Adrian to come. To tell her he believed in her, that he wouldn't let them send her away, that his silence in the throne room had been strategy rather than doubt. But the hours passed, and he never came. Night fell completely, and still no sign of him. Through the bond, Arya could feel him in the distance, could sense his turmoil, his conflict, could feel him wrestling with duty and desire. But he didn't come to her, didn't choose her. And that was the worst betrayal of all. Not the council's fear or Thea's lies or Rowan's hatred, but Adrian's silence, his absence, his inability to stand with her when she needed him most. As midnight approached, Arya made a decision. She wouldn't wait for sunrise, wouldn't let them parade her out of the kingdom like a criminal being transported. She would leave now on her own terms, and she would find the truth about her power and the darkness hunting her. And maybe, she would prove that she was worthy of being more than just a girl who survived. Maybe she would prove she was the light this kingdom needed, whether they deserved her or not. Arya gathered her things, wrapped herself in a dark cloak, and moved to the window. The guards were stationed at her door, but the window looked out over a section of wall that was less guarded. She called on the silver light, let it strengthen her body, and climbed out into the night. Behind her, she felt the bond stretch and strain as she put distance between herself and Adrian. Felt the moment he sensed what she was doing, felt his sudden panic, his desperate reach through the connection. Arya, wait. But she closed herself off from the bond, wrapped her mind in silver light until his voice faded to a whisper. She couldn't hear him right now, couldn't let his words change her mind. This was her choice, her path, and she would walk it alone. Adrian sat in his private study, a half-empty glass of whiskey on the desk before him, and stared at the reports Meryn had brought him hours ago. Evidence that Thea had lied. That the curse was manufactured by fear rather than inherent to the power. Evidence he'd seen too late. He'd spent the hours since the throne room session trying to find a political solution. A way to protect Arya without fracturing the kingdom irreparably. The northern pacts were already pulling support. If he refused their demands outright, it could mean civil war. But if he gave in, if he sent Arya away, the mate bond would survive separation. But would she? Would he? He'd been trying to find a third option, a compromise that would satisfy the fearful nobles while keeping Arya safe. Had been so focused on political maneuvering that he'd forgotten the most important thing. That she needed him. Not as a king with solutions, but as her mate, her partner. And he'd failed her. He felt it the moment she left, the bond stretching, straining, and then her presence retreating rapidly into the distance. Adrian was on his feet instantly, the reports scattering as he bolted for the door. She was running. His stubborn, brave, impossible mate was running rather than waiting for him to fix what he'd broken. He shifted mid-stride, his wolf taking over, and raced through the palace corridors toward her quarters. The guards stationed there looked alarmed as he skidded to a halt, already knowing what he'd find. The window open. The room empty. His mate gone. Adrian's howl of rage and grief echoed through the palace, waking everyone who'd managed to sleep despite the tension. But it was too late. Arya was already beyond the walls, running into a night filled with danger and shadow and the darkness that hunted her. Running alone. Because he'd been too slow, too careful, too much the king and not enough the mate. And as Adrian stood in her empty room, surrounded by the lingering scent of her and the ghost of her presence, he made a vow. He would find her. He would protect her. He would stand beside her against whatever came. Even if it meant burning down his kingdom to do it. Even if it meant choosing her over duty, over tradition, over everything he'd been taught a king should be. Because some bonds were worth more than crowns. And Arya was worth everything. 3 days in the wilderness changed Arya. She'd fled into the ancient forest, the same one where the shrine stood, instinct guiding her toward the place where her power had first awakened. If the darkness was coming for her, better to face it away from the city, away from the people who feared her, away from Adrian. The bond still stretched between them, a constant ache in her chest. She felt him searching for her, felt his desperation and regret bleeding through the connection even though she kept her side closed. He'd sent guards. Sent trackers. Sent what felt like half the kingdom into the forest looking for her. But Arya had learned to wrap herself in silver light, to become invisible to those who didn't know how to see past the physical. The forest welcomed her, recognized her as kin, and helped hide her from searchers who crashed through the underbrush with all the subtlety of a stampeding herd. She'd spent the days studying Mare Scroll, learning the true histories of the Silver Light Bearers. Learning that most of them had been protectors, guardians who stood between their packs and the darkness that periodically rose to threaten the world. Learning that the ones who'd gone mad with power had been driven there by persecution and isolation, by being treated as monsters until they had no choice but to become what everyone feared. She wouldn't let that be her story. But she also wouldn't go back. Couldn't go back to a palace full of people who looked at her like a weapon that might explode at any moment. Couldn't stand beside a mate who'd hesitated when she needed him most, who'd let political concerns override the bond between them. Even if that hesitation had only lasted a few hours. Even if she felt his regret like a physical weight through their connection. Some wounds went too deep for apologies to heal. On the third night, Arya sat in a small clearing near the shrine, the ancient tree visible through the shadows, its silver light pulsing gently in greeting. She'd been practicing, learning to shape her power with more precision. Could create barriers of light, could purify corrupted things, could even heal minor injuries on the small animals that approached her without fear. The power was vast, far larger than she'd initially understood. And it was growing stronger every day, as if awakening it had unlocked something that refused to be contained again. "We're getting stronger," her wolf observed, satisfaction in her mental voice. "Learning what we're capable of. Still not enough to face that shadow creature if it comes back at full strength. Maybe not alone. But who says we have to face it alone? Everyone left us alone," Arya reminded her. "That's kind of the whole problem. The mate didn't want to. You felt his conflict. Felt him trying to find another way. He should have just chosen me." The words came out bitter. Shouldn't have needed another way. Her wolf was quiet for a moment. Then, gently, "You're being unfair. He's an alpha king. He can't just ignore his responsibilities because his heart wants something different. You know that." Arya did know that. Logically, rationally, she understood the impossible position Adrian had been in. Understood that he'd been trying to protect both her and his kingdom, trying to find a solution that didn't require sacrificing either. But logic didn't suit the hurt. Didn't erase the memory of standing in that throne room, being debated like an object, while her mate remained silent. A sound in the forest made her tense. Not the clumsy crashing of the search parties that had been combing the woods. This was quieter. More deliberate. Arya rose to her feet, silver light gathering in her palms, prepared to defend herself or run depending on who emerged from the trees. But it wasn't guards or trackers who stepped into the clearing. It was Elder Thea. The old woman looked different out here, away from the throne room and its formality. Her robes were travel-stained, her hair disheveled, and her eyes held a wildness that Arya hadn't noticed before. "Clever girl," Thea said, her voice carrying an edge that felt wrong. "Leading them all on a chase while you hide here, growing stronger. Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" Arya's hands blazed brighter. "How did you find me?" "Because I've been hunting your kind for 40 years, child. I know how you think. Know where you run when you're frightened." Thea moved closer, and Arya saw she wasn't alone. Shadows peeled away from the trees behind her. Not guards. Not wolves. Shadow creatures. Dozens of them, their red eyes glowing in the darkness, their twisted forms barely contained by the shapes they wore. Horror washed through Arya. "You're controlling them." Controlling is such a crude word. Thea's smile was cold. "I prefer guiding. Directing. The shadow has been my ally for a very long time. Ever since it showed me the truth about the silver light and what it really represents." "You lied." "In the throne room. The bearers weren't cursed." "Oh, they were cursed. Just not the way I told the council." Thea's eyes glittered with malice. "Cursed with power they didn't deserve. Cursed with the moon's favor when they should have been nothing. The first bearer stole that power, yes. Stole it from those of us who'd spent lifetimes studying the sacred arts, who'd earned the right to transcend mortal limitations. And she gave it to her bloodline freely, passed it down like a gift instead of the theft it was. Understanding crashed over Arya. You're jealous. This whole thing, the persecution of the bearers, the lies about the curse, it's all because you couldn't have the power yourself. We should all have access to it. Thea's composure cracked, fury blazing through. Not just one bloodline. Not just those born with the mark. Magic should belong to those with the will and knowledge to use it properly. But instead, it's locked in the blood of girls who don't even want it, who try to bury it and hide from it. So you made a deal with the shadow, Arya said, pieces clicking into place. Gave yourself to the darkness in exchange for power. I took what should have been mine from the beginning. Thea raised her hands, and darkness began to pool around her fingers. Not silver light, but its opposite, thick, oily, corrupt. And now I'm going to take yours. The shadow entity I serve hungers for silver light. Feed it enough bearers, and it grows stronger. Strong enough to challenge the moon herself. Strong enough to remake the world into something where power goes to those who earn it, not those lucky enough to be born with the right blood. The shadow creatures began to spread out, surrounding the clearing, cutting off escape routes. Arya's mind raced. She couldn't fight this many. Even with her growing power, she wasn't trained enough, wasn't experienced enough. And if Thea was controlling them, then killing the creatures wouldn't stop the attack. She'd just summon more. We need help, her wolf said urgently. We need the mate. He's too far away. Even if I opened the bond, even if he felt my distress, he couldn't get here in time. Then we run. Live to fight another day. But Arya looked at the ancient tree behind her, at the shrine where her power had awakened. If Thea gained control of this place, if she corrupted it the way she'd corrupted herself, the silver light would die. The balance would shatter. And there would be nothing left to stand against the shadow when it rose again. I'm not running, Arya said quietly. Thea laughed. Finally, some fire. Good. I was afraid this would be too easy. But you're still just a girl playing with power she doesn't understand. While I've been wielding darkness for decades. She attacked. Shadow lashed out like whips, fast and deadly. Arya threw up a barrier of silver light, and the two forces collided with a crack that shook the ground. The barrier held, but barely, cracks already forming under the assault. The shadow creatures charged from all sides. Arya spun, releasing bursts of light in every direction, trying to keep them back. She managed to purify 3 of them before the rest adapted, learning to dodge her attacks, to come at her from angles she couldn't defend. Claws raked across her back. Teeth sank into her calf. Pain exploded through her body, and Arya screamed, stumbling to her knees. Get up, her wolf snarled. Get up or we die here. Arya pushed herself up, blood streaming from her wounds, and sent out another wave of silver light. It drove the creatures back temporarily, but she was tiring fast. Using too much power too quickly, burning through her reserves. Thea watched with cold satisfaction. You see? All that potential and you still can't win. Because you fight alone. Because you're weak. I'm not weak. Arya's hands blazed brighter even as her vision swam from blood loss. I'm just outnumbered. Semantics. Either way, you lose. More shadow whips lashed out, and this time Arya's barrier shattered completely. The darkness hit her square in the chest, sending her flying backward. She crashed into the base of the ancient tree, her head cracking against the trunk hard enough to make stars explode across her vision. The world tilted. Darkened. Through the haze of pain and fading consciousness, Arya heard Thea approaching. Such a waste, the elder murmured. You could have been magnificent if you'd been trained properly. If you'd embraced what you are instead of running from it. But you're too broken. Too scared. Too much like all the others who came before you. Arya tried to move, to defend herself, but her body wouldn't respond. Blood pooled beneath her, too much blood, and the silver light that usually rose to heal her flickered weakly, unable to overcome the corruption seeping into her wounds. She was dying. Sister, no. Don't give up. Please don't give up. But what was the point? She'd fought and survived and run and fought again, and for what? To die alone in a forest while the world that rejected her went on without her? Maybe Thea was right. Maybe she was too weak, too broken, too cursed to be the light anyone needed. You are not cursed. The voice that spoke wasn't her wolf. It was older, deeper, echoing from the ancient tree at her back. You are chosen, beloved, the light incarnate, and you will not fall here. Warmth flooded through Arya, originating from the point where her body touched the tree. Silver light blazed up from the roots, wrapping around her, seeping into her wounds, healing her, strengthening her, filling her with power that felt infinite. Stand, daughter. Stand and show them what the moon's blessing truly means. Arya's eyes snapped open, blazing pure silver. The light around her intensified, growing brighter and brighter until even Thea had to shield her eyes. When Arya stood, she was no longer just a girl with power. She was the power itself. Silver light poured from her skin, her hair lifting in a wind that came from nowhere, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every bearer who'd come before her. I am not your sacrifice. The words resonated through the clearing, through the forest, through the earth itself. And the world answered. The ground trembled. The ancient tree blazed with light so bright it turned night into day. And from the tree, from the shrine, from the sacred earth beneath their feet, silver light erupted in a pillar that shot straight into the sky. Across the kingdom, people stopped what they were doing and stared in wonder as a column of silver radiance pierced the heavens, visible for miles in every direction. In the palace, Adrian, who'd been preparing to lead another search party himself, felt the surge of power through the bond and knew immediately what it meant. Arya, his mate, no longer hiding, no longer running, fighting. Mobilize every available fighter, he barked to his guards. We ride for the shrine. Now. But even as he raced for the stables, even as he called his wolf forward and prepared to run faster than he'd ever run, Adrian knew he might not make it in time. Knew that whatever was happening in that forest, Arya was facing it alone. And all he could do was pray she was strong enough to survive until he reached her. In the clearing, Thea staggered back from the pillar of light, shock replacing her confident malice. Impossible, she breathed. You shouldn't be able to, the power shouldn't. You don't get to tell me what I can or can't do. Arya walked forward, and with each step, the light grew stronger. You spent decades hunting my kind, killing us, corrupting the truth about what we are. All because you were jealous. All because you chose darkness when you could have chosen to celebrate the light in others. I chose power. You chose fear. Arya raised her hands, and the silver light began to take shape. Not just formless energy, but something deliberate, controlled. You were afraid you didn't matter. Afraid you weren't special. So you made a deal with something that promised to make you powerful, and all it cost was your humanity. The shadow creatures began to back away, whimpering, as the light intensified. They could feel what was coming. Could sense the purification that would burn away their corruption and free them from Thea's control. Attack her. Thea screamed. All of you attack. But the creatures couldn't. The light held them frozen, and one by one, they began to dissolve. Not destroyed, freed. Released from the shadow's grip to finally find peace. Thea's eyes widened with panic as her army disappeared. No, this isn't, you can't. I can. Arya's voice was calm, certain. Because this is what the silver light was always meant to do. Not destroy. Not dominate. Heal. Purify. Restore balance. She focused her attention on Thea, and the elder screamed as silver light wrapped around her, seeping into her skin, burning away the corruption she'd willingly embraced. Please, Thea gasped as decades of shadow poison was purged from her system. Please, it hurts. I know. And Arya did know. Could feel the echo of Thea's pain through the light, could sense how deeply the darkness had burrowed into her. But it has to burn out or it will consume you completely. The purification was brutal, relentless. Thea collapsed, convulsing, as the light scoured away everything the shadow had given her. All the borrowed power, all the artificial strength, all the corruption that had sustained her for 40 years. When it was finally done, Thea lay gasping on the ground, looking ancient and frail. The woman who'd been sustained by shadow magic was suddenly just an old woman, mortal and powerless. "Why?" Thea whispered. "Why didn't you just kill me?" "Because that's not who I am." Arya knelt beside her, the silver light still radiating but gentler now. "You spent your life convinced that power meant domination, that having a gift meant using it to hurt others. But you were wrong. The real power is in choosing mercy when vengeance would be easier. Choosing to heal instead of harm." Thea's eyes filled with tears, whether from pain or regret or simply shock, Arya couldn't tell. But before either of them could speak again, the ground began to shake. Not the tremors from before. This was different. Stronger. More violent. And from the east, from the direction of the capital, a roar echoed through the night. Not a wolf's roar. Something larger. Darker. The shadow entity itself, no longer content to work through intermediaries. Arya rose to her feet, her eyes fixed on the horizon where she could see darkness gathering. Not the scattered remnants of Thea's creatures, but a massive, cohesive force that blotted out the stars. "The real enemy," her wolf said grimly. "The one from the vision. It's coming. Let it come." Arya's hands blazed with silver light. "I'm not running anymore." The pillar of light from the shrine pulsed brighter, and Arya felt something shift inside her. The power wasn't just hers anymore, it was connecting to something larger. To the earth, to the moon above, to every bearer who'd come before and poured their strength into the sacred places. She wasn't alone. Had never been alone. All those ancestors, all those warriors who'd stood against the shadow, they were here. Part of the light. Part of her. "Use us," their voices whispered in her mind. "We stand with you, daughter. Now and always." Arya closed her eyes and opened herself completely to the power. Let it fill her beyond what she thought she could hold. Let it transform her from mortal girl into something more. When her eyes opened again, they glowed pure silver, no iris or pupil visible. Her skin had become translucent, light shining from within, and when she moved, after images of silver radiance trailed behind her. This was her true form. The full manifestation of what a silver light bearer could become. And it was glorious. The shadow entity reached the edge of the forest, and Arya saw it clearly for the first time. It was massive, a writhing amalgamation of darkness and malice that dwarfed the creature Adrian had fought in the city. This was no mere scout or fragment. This was the source. The origin. The first shadow that had opposed the moon's light when the world was young. It spoke, and its voice was 1,000 screams layered together. "You dare face me, little light? I who have devoured stars and extinguished suns. I who existed before your precious moon lifted the first wolf from dirt." "I'm not just a light," Arya replied, and her voice carried the same layered quality, all the ancestors speaking through her. "I'm the light. The accumulation of every bearer who came before me. The moon's answer to your darkness. Then you will burn out just like they did. Bright and brief and ultimately meaningless." The entity attacked, a wave of pure shadow rushing toward her like a tsunami of malice. Arya raised her hands and met it with silver light. The collision was cataclysmic. Where the two forces met, reality itself seemed to crack. The air split with thunder that rattled bones. The ground heaved and buckled. Trees at the edge of the clearing exploded into splinters from the sheer pressure of opposing powers. But Arya held firm. She poured everything into the light. Her pain, her rage, her love, her hope, every emotion she'd buried and denied and tried to make herself small to contain. She let it all fuel the fire, let it burn as bright as it wanted. And the shadow began to retreat. Inch by inch, the darkness was pushed back by silver radiance. The entity shrieked, throwing more force at her, trying to overwhelm through sheer volume. But Arya wasn't fighting alone anymore. Through the bond, still present despite the distance, despite her attempts to close it off, she felt Adrian approaching. Felt his absolute faith in her, his certainty that she would prevail, his love blazing like a golden star in her awareness. She drew on that too. Used it to strengthen her resolve, to remind her what she was fighting for. Not just survival. Not just proving herself. But for the possibility of a future. of happiness, of standing beside someone who saw all of her. Light and shadow, strength and fear, and loved her anyway. The silver light surged brighter. And across the kingdom, in every sacred place where the old magic still dwelt, shrines began to wake. Ancient stones that hadn't glowed in centuries blazed to life. Wells blessed by the moon overflowed with silver water. Trees marked with the symbols of the first wolves erupted in light, all of them responding to Aria's call, all of them adding their power to hers. The shadow entity realized its mistake too late. It had come expecting to face one girl, newly awakened and untrained. Instead, it faced the accumulated power of every sacred place in the kingdom, channeled through a bearer who'd finally stopped being afraid of what she was. No, it shrieked. This cannot be. You are mortal. You will burn out, break, shatter. Maybe, Aria agreed, feeling her body beginning to strain under the massive flow of power. But not today. She pulled on every reserve of strength she had left and released it in one final, devastating burst. The silver light exploded outward in a wave that consumed the shadow entity completely, purified it down to its core, burning away millennia of accumulated malice and hatred until only the faintest spark of what it had been before corruption remained. A single shadow wolf, small and confused, blinking up at Aria with eyes that were no longer red but amber. Free. The wave continued beyond the entity, rolling across the kingdom, touching every dark corner, every corrupted thing. Everywhere it passed, shadow creatures were freed from control, darkness was pushed back, and life that had been struggling under the entity's influence flourished anew. When the light finally faded, Aria stood alone in a clearing transformed. The ancient tree behind her glowed with peaceful silver radiance. The earth beneath her feet was healed, vibrant. And the small shadow wolf sat at her feet, gazing at her with something like worship. Aria looked down at her hands and saw they were shaking. The power was receding now, returning to its resting place inside her, and in its absence she felt hollow, exhausted beyond anything she'd ever experienced. Her knees buckled. But before she could hit the ground, strong arms caught her. Adrian. He'd shifted back to human form, his chest heaving from the run, his eyes wild with fear and relief. "I've got you," he murmured, lowering them both to the ground, cradling her against his chest. "I've got you. You're safe. Did it work?" Aria's voice was barely a whisper. "Is it over? You destroyed it. Purified it. I felt it through the bond, the whole kingdom felt it." Adrian's hand smoothed her hair back from her face, his touch infinitely gentle. "You saved us all." Aria wanted to smile, to feel victorious, but all she felt was tired. "Thea," she managed. "She's here." She was controlling. "I know. We found her." Adrian's jaw tightened. "She's been taken into custody. She'll face judgment for what she's done." Other wolves were arriving now, guards, trackers, even some of the alphas who demanded Aria's exile. They stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the transformed shrine, at the girl who'd just channeled enough power to reshape the kingdom's magical landscape, staring at her with awe instead of fear. Rowan was among them, his expression complicated. He approached slowly, dropping to one knee before Aria and Adrian. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "We all were. You're not a curse. He struggled for words. Everything the old stories promised. The light we needed." Aria didn't have the energy to acknowledge his apology. Didn't have the energy for anything except breathing and holding onto Adrian. "Get Marin," Adrian ordered one of the guards. "And clear this area. She needs space and quiet." As the others retreated, as Adrian held her and murmured reassurances, Aria felt the bond between them fully open again. Felt his anguish over hesitating in the throne room. His desperate search for her. His absolute terror when he'd felt her facing the entity alone. And underneath it all, steady and unshakable, his love. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her hair. "I'm so sorry I didn't stand with you immediately. I should have told them all to burn if they couldn't accept you. Should have chosen you over everything else." "You're a king," Aria murmured. "You can't just." "I can. And I will. From now on, Anyone who threatens you threatens me. Anyone who wants you gone will have to go through me first. His arms tightened. I don't care if it costs me the crown. You're worth more than any throne. Arya tilted her head up to look at him, saw the fierce truth in his eyes. Don't lose your crown for me, she said softly. But maybe we can reshape what it means to rule. Together. Adrian's smile was brilliant despite the tears streaming down his face. Together. Always together. As dawn began to break over the forest, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Arya closed her eyes and let herself rest. She'd claimed her power. Proven her worth. Saved a kingdom that hadn't known it needed saving. And now, finally, she could simply be. Not a curse or a threat or a problem to solve. Just Arya. The Silver Lightbearer. The Alpha King's mate. The girl who'd learned that she was never meant to be small. And the woman who would reshape the world with light and love and the fierce determination to never let fear win again. The kingdom changed in the weeks that followed. Not all at once. Not with the dramatic finality of Arya's confrontation with the shadow entity. Change never worked that way, not the kind that lasted anyway. But slowly, steadily, the kingdom began to shift. The shrines that had awakened during Arya's battle remained lit, their silver glow visible across the land. They became places of pilgrimage, where wolves traveled to remember the old magic, the old ways, the connection between their kind and the moon that had blessed them. Some said they could feel the presence of the light-bearers who'd come before, their sacrifice and strength soaked into the sacred earth. Others said they could feel Arya herself in those places. The living embodiment of what the shrines represented, power tempered by mercy, strength balanced with compassion. The Omegas released from the auction houses began to find their voices. Some chose to join pacts, but on their own terms, with contracts that protected their autonomy and dignity. Others formed communities of their own, support networks that proved Omegas didn't need to be owned or controlled to thrive. A few even discovered they carried gifts of their own, not silver light, but healing abilities, prophetic dreams, connections to the earth that had been suppressed by years of being told they were worthless. The power structure of the kingdom cracked and reformed, old prejudices confronted by the undeniable truth that an Omega had saved them all when the Alphas had been ready to throw her away. But not everyone was happy about it. Rowan and the Northern Pacts had bent the knee after witnessing Arya's power firsthand, but their loyalty was fragile, built on respect for strength rather than genuine acceptance. Whispers still circulated in some territories that the Silver Light was dangerous, that Arya had simply proven she was powerful enough to fear rather than powerful enough to trust. Some nobles left the capital entirely, retreating to their ancestral lands, refusing to serve a king who'd chosen an Omega mate over tradition and political convenience. The council was split, half of them awed by what Arya had accomplished, the other half resentful that a girl who'd stumbled into the throne room barely a month ago now wielded more influence than members who'd served for decades. And Elder Thea, imprisoned and awaiting trial, had become a symbol. To some, she represented the dangers of jealousy and corruption, a cautionary tale about what happened when you chose darkness over light. To others, she was a martyr, punished for daring to question whether one bloodline should hold monopoly over sacred power. The kingdom was healing. But healing was messy, painful, filled with setbacks and arguments and the slow, grinding work of changing hearts and minds. Through it all, Arya learned what it meant to be more than a survivor. She trained with her power daily, guided by Meryn who'd uncovered ancient texts about the Lightbearers. She learned to heal with precision, to create barriers that could protect entire sections of the city, to purify corruption without destroying the host. She learned the limits of her strength, that channeling too much power for too long would leave her unconscious for days, that emotional turmoil could make the light unstable, that despite its vastness, the power was still finite. She was not invincible, not infallible, not the perfect savior some people wanted her to be. She was just Arya, doing her best with a gift she was still learning to understand. And she was learning to be Adrian's mate. That somehow was harder than mastering her power. The bond between them was strong, undeniable, and beautiful, and so intense it sometimes took her breath away. But bonds didn't erase differences or magically solve conflicts. They still argued. Still struggled to balance his responsibilities as king with her need for autonomy. Still navigated the complicated politics of being partners when the whole kingdom was watching, waiting for them to fail. Some nights, Arya would wake from nightmares of the throne room, of standing there while Adrian remained silent, and even though she knew he'd been trying to find a solution, even though she understood the position he'd been in, the hurt lingered. Some nights, Adrian would hold her and apologize again, his guilt a palpable thing in the darkness, and Arya would have to remind him that she'd forgiven him, that they were moving forward, that mistakes didn't define them unless they refused to learn from them. They were imperfect. Learning. Growing together in fits and starts. But they were together. And that mattered more than perfection ever could. 6 weeks after the battle at the shrine, Arya stood in the throne room once again. But this time, she wasn't a terrified Omega clinging to the obsidian throne, desperate for sanctuary. This time, she stood beside Adrian as delegates from across the kingdom gathered for the first Grand Council since the Shadow Entity's defeat. She wore a gown of deep silver that caught the light, her hair braided with threads of white gold, the subtle marks on her wrists no longer scars but symbols of power freely claimed, visible for all to see. She looked like what she was. The Alpha King's mate. A silver light-bearer. A force to be reckoned with. But underneath the finery, she was still the girl who'd run barefoot through these halls, bleeding and afraid. She carried both versions of herself now. The broken and the powerful. The fearful and the fierce. And she was learning that she didn't have to choose between them. She could be all of it at once. The throne room filled with representatives from every territory. Alphas and betas, omegas who'd never before been granted seats at official gatherings, healers and scholars and warriors. This council looked different from any that had come before, more diverse, more representative, less bound by tradition, and more focused on building something new. Adrian rose from his throne, and the room fell silent. "We gather here in the aftermath of darkness," he began, his voice carrying easily through the space. "We've all seen what nearly destroyed us. What would have destroyed us if not for one person's courage and sacrifice?" His eyes found Arya's, and the look in them made her chest tight. "I called this council to address the future," Adrian continued. "To decide what kind of kingdom we want to be. One that clings to traditions that no longer serve us? Or one that evolves, that learns, that becomes better than what we inherited?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The Blood Moon auctions will not return," Adrian said firmly. "That's not up for debate. But we need systems to support Omegas and other vulnerable members of our society. We need to dismantle the hierarchies that value some wolves over others based solely on designation. That's a complete restructuring of pack law," one of the Northern Alphas protested. "You're talking about appending centuries of tradition." "I'm talking about survival," Adrian shot back. "The shadow entity rose because of imbalance. Because we allowed fear and prejudice to create rifts in the very fabric of our society. Those rifts are what darkness feeds on. If we don't heal them, if we don't become stronger and more unified, the next threat will tear us apart." An Omega from the Eastern Territories stood, and the fact that she felt comfortable speaking in this setting was itself revolutionary. "What guarantee do we have that these changes will last? That the moment attention shifts elsewhere, we won't be right back where we started?" Adrian looked to Arya, a silent question in his eyes. She could stay quiet. Let him handle the politics. That would be easier, safer. But Arya had learned that safety was an illusion. And silence was just another form of cage. She stepped forward. "You have my guarantee," she said, her voice steady. "I know what it's like to be powerless. To be treated as less than. To watch the world decide your worth based on something you can't control. I won't let that happen to others if I have the ability to prevent it." She let silver light flicker across her hands, a subtle reminder of the power she carried. "But I'm one person. I can't be everywhere, can't solve every problem. Real change requires all of us choosing differently. Choosing to see each other as people rather than designations. choosing compassion over convenience, choosing to be better than we were yesterday. The Omega who'd asked the question studied Arya for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Then you have my pack's support. We'll help build what comes next. Others began to voice their agreement. Not everyone, there were still dissenters, still those who clung to the old ways. But enough. A foundation to build on. The council session stretched for hours, debates ebbing and flowing, proposals raised and refined. Arya participated when asked, offered insights when relevant, but mostly she observed. Watched Adrian navigate the complex dance of ruling, balancing firmness with flexibility, knowing when to push and when to compromise. Watched the kingdom's representatives slowly, painfully begin to work together instead of against each other. Watched the birth of something new, fragile and imperfect, but full of potential. When the session finally adjourned, Arya was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with her power. Adrian found her in the East Wing quarters afterward, staring out the window at the city below. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You were magnificent today," he murmured. "I barely said anything. You didn't have to. Your presence was enough." The reminder that change is possible. That someone can go from being hunted to being honored. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You give people hope, Arya. Even when you don't realize it." She leaned back against him, letting his warmth chase away the chill of exhaustion. "Do you think it will work? Everything we're trying to build?" "Honestly? I don't know." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "Change is hard. People resist it. We'll face opposition and setbacks and probably outright rebellion from some territories. But we have to try. Because the alternative is going back to the way things were, and that nearly destroyed us." Arya was quiet, processing. Then, softly, "I'm scared." "Of what?" "That I'm not enough. That my power isn't enough. That one day, something worse than the shadow entity will come, and I won't be strong enough to stop it." Adrian turned her in his arms so they were face to face. "You don't have to be strong enough alone. That's the whole point. We face threats together, you and me, the kingdom united instead of divided. And if I fail anyway, then we fail together. And we get back up and try again." His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You're not responsible for saving the world single-handedly, Arya. You're just responsible for doing your part. And you're already doing more than anyone has the right to ask." Tears pricked at Arya's eyes. She blinked them away, but not before Adrian saw. "What is it?" he asked gently. "Sometimes I miss being nobody," she admitted. "Being the girl who could disappear and no one would notice or care. There was freedom in that, in a terrible way. Now everything I do matters. Every choice ripples outward. And I'm terrified of making the wrong ones." "Welcome to kingship," Adrian said with a wry smile. "That terror never really goes away. You just learn to act despite it." "How do you do it?" "Carry the weight without breaking." His expression softened. "I don't. Not alone. I have you now. You carry me when I'm weak, and I carry you. That's what mates do. What partners do." Arya searched his eyes and found nothing but sincerity. Nothing but love and determination and the quiet promise that they were in this together, whatever this turned out to be. She kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't articulate into the press of her lips against his. Gratitude and fear and love and hope all tangled together. When they broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "We'll figure it out," he promised. "One day at a time. One challenge at a time. Together. Together." That word had become Arya's anchor. Her reminder that she wasn't alone, wasn't facing the world with nothing but her own strength to sustain her. She had Adrian. Had her wolf. Had a power she was still learning to wield. And maybe, just maybe, she had a future that held more than just survival. Maybe she had happiness waiting if she was brave enough to reach for it. That night, Arya dreamed. Not nightmares this time. Something different. She stood in the clearing where the shrine lived, but it was different now. Brighter. The ancient tree pulsed with silver light, and gathered around it were figures made of the same radiance. The past bearers. All of them. Generations of women who'd carried the silver light, who'd fought their own battles against darkness and fear and rejection. They didn't speak, but Arya felt their presence like a warm embrace. Felt their approval, their pride, their acknowledgement that she'd done what they'd always hoped one of their line would do, survive long enough to claim the power fully, to use it not for vengeance, but for healing. One figure stepped forward, and Arya recognized her from the visions. The first bearer. The woman with amber eyes who'd walked between worlds. She smiled, and when she spoke, her voice was the same one that had called Arya daughter in this very place. You've done well. Better than we dared hope. The light is safe with you. I don't know what I'm doing, Arya confessed. I'm making it up as I go. We all were. That's the secret no one tells you. There's no manual for this. No perfect path. Just choices, made moment by moment, trying to do more good than harm. What if I fail? What if more darkness comes and I can't stop it? The first bearer's expression was understanding. Then you do what we all did. You fight with everything you have. You trust in those who stand beside you. And if you fall, you make sure your fall means something. That it bought time, or inspired others, or weakened the darkness enough for the next bearer to finish what you started. That's terrifying. Yes, but it's also beautiful. Because it means you're never truly alone. Every bearer who came before you poured their strength into the sacred places. Every bearer who comes after you will carry the legacy you're building now. We're all connected, across time, across death itself. The light endures. Arya felt tears streaming down her face. I wish my mother could have told me this. Could have explained what I was instead of being afraid of it. She was afraid because she loved you. Wanted to protect you from the burden. But Arya. The first bearer stepped closer, and Arya felt warmth radiating from her. It was never a burden. It was always a gift. And you're finally learning to see it that way. The dream began to fade, the figures dissolving back into light, but the first bearer's final words echoed in Arya's mind. Live, daughter. Not just survive, live. Love. Fight. Laugh. Be everything you were denied for too long. That's how you honor us. That's how the light endures. Arya woke to dawn light streaming through the window and Adrian, still asleep beside her, one arm draped protectively across her waist. She lay still, watching him sleep, marveling at how different everything was from that desperate night when she'd burst into the throne room with nothing but terror and stubborn refusal to give up. She'd been so broken then. So certain she would never be anything more than a problem to be managed or a threat to be eliminated. But somehow, impossibly, she'd found this. Found him. Found her power and her purpose and the strength to stand tall instead of making herself small. She was still learning. Still afraid sometimes. Still carried scars that would probably never fully heal. But she was also whole in a way she'd never been before. And that wholeness was worth every battle, every tear, every moment of doubt. Adrian's eyes fluttered open, immediately finding hers, and his sleepy smile made her heart skip. Morning, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Morning. You're thinking too loud, he teased. I can feel it through the bond. Arya laughed softly. Sorry. Just processing. Realizing how much has changed. Good changes. She considered, then nodded. Mostly. Terrifying changes. But good. Adrian pulled her closer, and Arya went willingly, tucking herself against his chest. What's next for you? He asked. What does the powerful silver light bearer want to do with her day? Arya thought about the council sessions that would continue. The training she needed to maintain. The kingdom that was slowly, painfully trying to become something better. All the responsibilities that came with the power and position she'd never asked for but had claimed anyway. I want to visit the Omegas from the auction houses, she said after a moment. The ones who are still figuring out what to do next. I want them to know they're not alone. That someone who understands what they went through is here, is fighting for them. Adrian's smile was proud. Then that's what we'll do. You think I'm letting you wander the city without me? After everything. He kissed the top of her head. We're partners, Arya. Your causes are my causes. Your battles are my battles. Where you go, I follow. Something warm and fierce bloomed in Arya's chest. Not the silver light, but something equally powerful. Love. Trust. Hope. The foundation of everything they were building together. Okay, she whispered. Together, then. Always together. And so the story continues. Not with a neat ending, because real life doesn't wrap up in tidy conclusions. But with the promise of more chapters to come. More battles to fight, more changes to navigate, more moments of joy and sorrow and everything in between. Arya wasn't naive enough to think the darkness was gone forever. Something that ancient, that fundamental, didn't disappear just because it had been defeated once. It would return in one form or another. Maybe in her lifetime, maybe in the lifetimes of bearers yet to be born. But when it came, it would find a kingdom that had learned to value light instead of fearing it. That had learned to stand united instead of divided. That had learned strength came in many forms, not just the kind that dominated and controlled. And it would find Arya. No longer the terrified Omega who'd clung to a throne in desperation, but a woman who'd claimed her power, her worth, her right to exist in the world without apology. A woman who'd learned that the greatest strength wasn't in fighting alone, but in building connections that made everyone stronger. A woman who discovered that sometimes, the ones the world tries to break are exactly the ones with the power to reshape it. She was still learning what that meant. Still figuring out who she was beyond the trauma and the power and the expectations. But she had time now. Had freedom. Had a mate who loved her and a kingdom slowly learning to accept her and a future that held more possibilities than she'd ever dared imagine. She had survived. And now, finally, she was learning to live. So ask yourself this. If you found Arya on that night bleeding, terrified, clinging to a throne with nothing but desperate hope, would you have seen what Adrian saw? Would you have looked past the torn clothing and the fear and the reputation of curse and recognized the light underneath? Or would you have been like the council members, calculating risk and reward, seeing only a problem to be managed or eliminated? Would you have stood beside her when the entire kingdom called for her exile? When the easier path was to send her away and hope the darkness followed? Would you have chosen her side when choosing her meant defying tradition, risking political power, confronting your own prejudices about what Omegas could be? Would you have believed in her power even when she didn't believe in herself? These aren't idle questions. Because Arya's story isn't just about wolves and magic and ancient battles between light and shadow. It's about what we do with the people society has deemed broken. The ones carrying power they don't know how to use, trauma they're trying to heal from, worth they've been conditioned to deny. It's about the choice between fear and acceptance, between control and trust, between maintaining comfortable hierarchies and building something better, even when better is harder. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the ones with power. They're the ones so afraid of that power in others that they'll destroy anything that threatens their sense of control. Arya didn't ask to be special, didn't want to be chosen, would have given anything to just be normal, to blend in, to stop being the target of fear and hatred. But she was born with silver light in her veins, and that meant she had to choose, suppress herself to make others comfortable, or embrace what she was and face the consequences. She chose herself, her power, her worth. And in doing so, she saved a kingdom that hadn't deserved her but desperately needed her. The question is, would you have let her? Would you have given her the space to become who she was meant to be? Or would you have been another voice in the crowd, demanding she make herself smaller, quieter, less threatening? Think about it. Think about the Aryas in your own life. The people carrying gifts the world isn't ready to celebrate. The ones too bright, too powerful, too much for the boxes society tries to force them into. Are you Adrian, seeing their worth and standing beside them even when it's hard? Are you the council, afraid of change and clinging to tradition? Are you Thea, so consumed by jealousy that you'd rather destroy what you can't have? Or are you the kingdom itself, slowly learning, painfully evolving, trying to become better than what you were? We all play different roles at different times. The key is recognizing which role we're playing and choosing deliberately rather than defaulting to fear. Because here's the truth that Arya learned. Power isn't the problem. Fear of power is. Change isn't the enemy. Resistance to necessary change is. And strength doesn't come from dominating others. It comes from lifting each other up, from building connections that make everyone stronger, from choosing compassion even when cruelty would be easier. These are the lessons written in silver light and forged in shadow. These are the truths Arya carried through her transformation from victim to survivor to something more, a woman who learned she was never meant to be small and refused to diminish herself for anyone's comfort ever again. Her story doesn't end here. There are more battles to fight, more darkness to face, more moments when she'll doubt herself, when the weight will feel too heavy, when she'll wonder if she's enough. But she'll face them with Adrian at her side, with her power fully claimed, with the knowledge that she's not alone, has never been alone, will never be alone as long as the light endures. And the light always endures. It endures in the Omegas finding their voices and their strength. It endures in the kingdom slowly learning to value all its members rather than just the powerful ones. It endures in every person who chooses acceptance over fear, growth over stagnation, love over hatred. It endures in you if you choose to carry it. So will you choose her side? Will you choose the light even when darkness seems easier? Will you stand with the broken and the powerful and the ones still learning what they're capable of? Will you be part of building something better, even when better is harder? The choice, as always, is yours. If this story lit something inside you, if Arya's journey from terrified Omega to powerful bearer resonated in that deep place where your own struggles and triumphs live, then you belong here, with us, at Shayla's Romance Library. Because we don't just tell stories here. We tell truths wrapped in fantasy. We explore what it means to be powerful and powerless, broken and whole, afraid and fierce, sometimes all at once. We create spaces where the outcasts become heroes, where the ones society overlooked prove to be exactly what the world needs, where love is complicated and real and worth fighting for. We tell tales that burn, that challenge, that comfort, that remind you that your story isn't over, that your power is valid, that your worth isn't determined by how small you can make yourself for others' comfort. If you want more stories like Arya's, stories that make you feel deeply, that ask hard questions, that celebrate the strength it takes to simply survive and the courage it takes to actually live, then subscribe to Shayla's Romance Library. Join our pack, our community, our family of readers who believe that romance isn't just about happy endings, but about the messy, beautiful, painful journey of becoming who you're meant to be while finding someone who loves all of you, not just the easy parts. Hit that subscribe button. Join us. Because here, in Shayla's Romance Library, we tell stories about people like Arya. Like you. Like all of us who've ever felt too much, been too different, carried too much power or pain or potential to fit into the neat boxes the world prepared for us. We tell stories that matter. And we're just getting started. So tell me, would you have chosen her side? Would you have seen the light beneath the fear? Would you have stood with Arya when standing alone would have been safer? Think about your answer. And then decide what kind of story you want to live. Because that choice, that fundamental choice between fear and acceptance, between diminishment and empowerment, between playing it safe and daring to be magnificent, that choice is yours. Every single day, it's yours. Make it count.